Hey guys, I'm Brent.
I'm Lila, and you can find us on the web at www.braintrustlive.com. And this week we are very excited because we have my good friend and also most impressive friend, Kat Calvin, on the podcast with us today. So, welcome, Kat, to talk to us about the most exciting news week, and it was a full week in electoral history.
It was 10 years in 1 week. And it was like 3 billion Scaramucci's. And
Yes.
I felt them both all at once, and I still feel like I'm in them. It's a whole quantum Scaramucci situation.
We're having like some real like sci-fi-ish time situations going on.
Yeah.
It was a day that took a week somehow, like election day took a week, and it also took 4 years, and it
None of the
also
news
took
anchors
5 years.
knew what day it was. They were like actively not knowing the day.
Oh yeah,
Kornacki just wore the same pants for 5 days in a row on national television.
Oh yeah, Anderson Cooper literally had to be. He said it was Saturday yesterday, and then he was like, "I think it's Saturday," and everyone thought he was kidding about whether he thought. It was
and then
Saturday.
they had a long discussion.
But then really needed like a firm like confirmation like in the ear from someone in the
Right.
control room that it was indeed Saturday yesterday.
Yeah, that bit went on for longer than I thought it would.
Yeah.
I think this is what happens when you go from the darkest timeline to a slightly less dark timeline, is that it takes so long to shift through that wormhole that we all just lost a couple of days.
That's well
It could
said.
be. Yeah, it's also like it was like a full week where like not a single person in America slept.
No.
Somehow like I've never lived in a country or a time or a place where like no one had slept all at once.
I know.
People
Oh, yeah.
were not at their most reasonable this week.
Well, and I finally slept on Friday night because like by Friday night he was like ahead in both Georgia and Pennsylvania.
Well,
But I
also
hadn't
by
called-
Friday night I had called it.
Right.
Right,
Once Lila
exactly.
called it,
Everybody had
I
called
was
it,
like,
and
I'm
so
taking a nap.
but
Yeah.
I missed the actual
Lila had
call.
called it.
Right. I missed the actual call on Saturday morning though because like I had not been sleeping all week. But Friday night I was like, okay, this thing seems like mostly cooked. And then I took what was really in hindsight probably an unhealthy amount of over-the-counter sleep medication on Friday night, and I slept for almost 11 hours. And I woke up at like 10:30, and I was like, what's happening? What's going on? Oh, we have a new president. Okay, great, good.
Well, I was shocked, like, because I had called it, I went to bed on Friday night feeling fine, and I was kind of shocked when everyone got so excited on Saturday because I was not expecting, like, a full nation block party to be awaiting CNN's call.
Right.
It was like everyone had been waiting in the wings for the CNN call, and then they were like, we got to go joyriding. We got to get out and dance in the streets. And I didn't realize that's what we were waiting for. I thought we had just, like, decided we knew.
Yeah.
I think people, and I felt this, and then I got a lot of texts saying the same thing for people who were like, I didn't think I'd be this happy, because it really was like, fine, I'll fucking vote for Biden, but like then when you realize like, oh, Trump lost, like the joy that overtook me was surprising to me, and I actually was like, why am I so happy? Like, 'cause I did not expect to feel that, and so I think the spontaneous joy, like I was like, no, I get that, because none of us thought that we were going to be excited, and then all of a sudden, and I think also like the relief of it ending,
I think
Yeah.
that was a
relief
big
of
part of
Trump
it.
losing, and we were all just like the elation, we went from like national exhaustion, productivity being at an all-time low across the country, everyone being pissed off, and then all of a sudden we were all like so happy. Like we have had more collective experiences as a nation and a world this year than ever before.
It's so true.
Yeah, it's definitely like, well, it being part of a full national slow rolling crisis. I feel like it's been character building, I guess. I don't know if in the right ways.
What's interesting though is we didn't really, because I agree with you, we have had so many collective experiences, but so often when you do have those collective experiences, I would have expected maybe this vote not to be as close considering our collective experiences that we've all had this year.
Well, we also have had the collective experience for the last 6 months of screaming our head offs at the Democrats for running a moronic campaign. So this is exactly where I thought it would happen.
I was gonna say that is my sort of like big. I have been in turn shocked that so many other people are shocked and scandalized by how close this. I mean, scandalized, yes, be scandalized by how close this is. Like I don't know, like what are white people doing? What is rural America doing? Like, what is anyone doing right now? It's all a big confusing mess. And I think only further hurt by the fact that like it's really hard from for people that live in cities to even like understand that there was like a risk to this much Trump voting out there, because it's just like not been a part of our sort of immediate surroundings. But I mean, except in Beverly Hills, I guess, where
right. I was just
learned
across
a lesson.
LA has been
LA's been specific
Trump territory.
Yeah, I would say like in New York less so. LA has been confusing this year, but I've also like when you run a candidate that's running on nothing in a time of grave economic need, of a time of intense racial animus, a time of all of these things, and then you decide that your response to that is to be like, we'll run someone who's kind of a nice guy who promises nothing will fundamentally change. Like, you can't then be scandalized when half the country is like, no, I will take racism instead, thank you. Like, you have to sort of think to yourself, like, could our party be maybe trying to message in a way that makes them think that there's other things to vote on? There was like nothing to vote on here. It was all just a big nothing. And so I am shocked that everyone's so shocked. Like, I think it's clear that it was clear to me that there would be a large number of voters who, were voting on entirely inappropriate bases against their own interests in every single case. And it was clear to me because there was no alternative messaging unless you lived in AOC's district.
Right.
Right.
Then you were getting it. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, Biden worked really hard to get Republicans elected. Like
Yes.
The DNC convention had more Republicans than brown people, and it happily had more Republicans than the RNC convention. Oh, there were no progressives.
I mean, the RNC made a now, was it a little on the nose and ridiculous? Sure, but they made real pitches to get voters of color, to get younger voters. I mean, all these things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and then you have, Biden go on the biggest black radio show in the country and say, well, you ain't, which is the part that insulted me the most. You ain't black if you don't vote for me. And like, he also gropes women. So like, the degrees of difference between them were already pretty limited. Well, and then when you have a campaign that's like, oh, but we're not even going to try to get like the Latino vote anyways. Like, well,
right. The Latino vote strategy was to hire a Republican to run it and then play Despacito from his phone at, like in Miami one time.
Well, and also be shocked when it turned out only Cubans went for that. Right. It's like, you hired a Republican. Of course, her only like community of outreach was other Republicans. Yeah. That's like, I think I'm hoping that this cycle, I think the one thing that's different than 2016 is that by we, I just mean the left in general, have like some actual mouthpieces who can articulate what went wrong here in a way that we didn't in 2016. In 2016, we just felt sad for ourselves and we didn't really like know what to do with that sadness. And I think, in 2018, we sort of saw, okay, some people like took that sadness and like turned it into action, and then we ended up with the squad. But I also think that now we have some voices that can, like, we're going to talk about that New York Times interview with AOC, that can like actually articulate where the Democratic Party is failing to drive turnout with their own voters and also reach voters that, I think the thing that offended me the most about all of this is Trump voters are not Republicans. They're crazy. It's craziness. So the idea of appealing to them like they're Reaganite Republicans was so baffling to me because I was like, of course that, talking about, being responsible about the deficit is not what these people are interested in. Like,
I know.
Like, they're populists. They're right-wing populists. And as everyone on this call, on this Zoom, on this podcast knows, I have been reading a book about the history of populism, so I'm real hopped up on populism right now. It's a book called The People. No,
it's The People. No. The comma is really important.
But it's about the sort of left-wing underpinnings of the original populist movement and the way that the populist movement was, in essence, a truly democratic movement in its early, formation, and how it got kind of shunted off into this far-right direction because the sort of people in charge were very threatened by the idea that regular people might want to, like, I don't know, govern themselves. And so I think if you think about the Trump movement as sort of problematic populists, you at least have a different respect for what might have helped them have less destructive ideas than if you just think of them as Reaganite Republicans, which this is not just like a nation. The Democratic Party is where the Reaganite Republicans are. And that,
I think, Lila, the problem is that you've thought about this, but no one in the Biden campaign ever has spent 5 seconds thinking this through.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, actually, I think that the reason I've thought so much about this is because I felt myself becoming radicalized during this election. And I think you both know that. But because of that, I've thought a lot about what radicalized Trump voters in the really problematic ways that they got radicalized. And these are all, we're living through a time of great economic need and crisis. And so what has every society in all of history done when they've been in a time of great crisis like this? They've gotten tribal, they've gotten racist, they've committed a genocide. That's a long-standing, result of times of great strife like this. And so to not have thought proactively, how do we stop that from being the result of this time as Democrats, and also to find myself not being radicalized, obviously, in the Trump vein, because I'm a New Yorker and I could never. But
well, so is he. And I'm going to remind you of that.
That's why I know. We know here. You're wondering which state is most excited to prosecute the man. It is the very people who spawned him. Yeah. But I mean, in finding myself becoming radicalized, I did find myself getting less responsive to the kind of middle-of-the-road political rhetoric that I was used to hearing from the Democratic Party. And then I started to think to myself, oh, no wonder we've lost all of these people. No wonder.
Right.
So, in any case.
Well, and I think just, going back to talking about, because we've been talking about how Biden ran a, less than inspiring campaign. And also, we've been talking about how happy we all were, or more happy than I think that we thought we were going to. I think those two things are sort of tied together, because I think what I found myself to be so happy about was not necessarily that Joe Biden won. It was certainly that Donald Trump had lost, but it was also like this feeling of like collective, like we did this.
Right,
it was sort of like we all got this done in spite of all of the other shit was going on, whether it was voter suppression or whether it was, Joe Biden running a just completely uninspired campaign. It was just sort of like everyone else really did this in spite of all of those things. So like that celebration yesterday really felt like I just sort of pretended like I was celebrating myself.
Well, and there's so many little things, like I know I'm constantly texting Lila with like, oh, I just remembered another reason that I want Biden to win, because it was difficult.
Right.
But it's difficult to remember this.
Like, I don't want us to leave NATO, right? Like, I want us to be part of the Paris Accords. Like, there are just these basic things. Yeah. And so there was sort of the relief of just all of the little things. And I realized I think it was like an hour after they called the election that I remembered, holy shit, we have a woman and a black woman and an Asian woman who is vice president. And I hadn't even thought of it because I was just going through the relief of Trump being out. And then I was elated because I was like, oh my God, this historic thing happened. And somehow I didn't even process it fully right away.
It was hard to, because my anger at Biden was so deep that when I finally realized I was happy yesterday, it was just because someone finally texted me and was like, Kamala's the VP. And then I looked at my news feed and it was only posts about her. And I was like, okay, well, I've picked the right friends, so that's great news.
She gave a really great speech last night, too.
She gave a great speech.
She's great.
She's like, that's because she's like a reasonable person. We had sort of said, I think early in the process, because, we were very much like left-wing candidates or bust, but certainly after the sort of hard left candidates, she was our first choice, of the sort of wider batch of candidates. And so I had said, during the VP selection process, I was like, I would have happily voted for her. I know she's not a perfect candidate, but I would have been excited to go to the polls for her. I would have been really, I would have felt the sort of excitement of that moment in a way that I didn't with Biden. And I almost think that Biden tried to like rob me of it because no one was talking about how exciting it was to vote for her. Up until yesterday when we were all like, oh, wait a minute.
Well, everyone in my family, and I was on like a radio show and said the same thing. Like, we all just covered Biden's name and voted for Harris.
That's what you had to do.
It's really what you had to do to feel good about it. But I think, Britt, you're right that there were so many emotions and so many things. And also, I didn't think about it until Kamala's speech, and she said, you've all worked so hard for 4 years. And I was like, oh my God, I actually did completely change my life 4 years ago to achieve this thing and fight voter suppression, all these other things, and like realizing like, God, it has been a horrible for years.
Yeah.
And like being able to just breathe a little bit, there's so much. I think I'll be unpacking emotions about this for a very long time.
Totally. The other thing that sort of I feel like at least midweek made me not necessarily feel better, but there was obviously, and we're going to talk about this as we go, there was, I think there were so many initial feelings of dread that so many people voted for Trump, and that's a conversation that, we can have or not have. But like, I think at one point, I feel like on either Wednesday or Thursday, as they were still counting votes, I was just sort of like, oh, this maybe was going to always be more hard than maybe I think that we all thought it was going to be. And so that I feel like once we finally did get the results, I think there was that sort of like, oh, we pulled it off. Like in a way that like I think we all felt like it was gonna look different. And also I feel like had we just been able to count votes in a timely fashion, it would have looked different quicker. But which would have maybe like relieved some of the angst that I think that we had on like Tuesday night into Wednesday.
That required like a block party on Saturday.
Right. But that sort of was one thing that at least I kind of was like, oh, wait, maybe this was just
well, also
as the bag as much as we thought it was, and clearly it wasn't because
it's
the victory with Biden.
It's the victory he deserved. I think Pat was probably the first person who said that to me. But this is the victory a Joe Biden candidate deserves. He did not shake things up in some great way that, and I know they're going to try to sort of spin this as if he has some mandate for his moderate agenda. But I think when you really get down to the vote counts, what he has a mandate to do is support the progressive left enough that they can get the votes out for him. Because if we look at where his, some of these states that he flipped, they were flipped by like Ilhan Omar knocking doors. They were flipped by insurgent progressive candidates who understand the importance of voting, of growing the pool of voters, not just constant. I mean, one thing that I find very frustrating about volunteering with Democratic campaigns is their list is always so constrained to just like people who always vote. And so it's almost like in every community, there are like millions of people who don't vote at all, who could vote, who are even registered to vote in some cases, who qualify for, who have the right ID, who have everything they need to vote and just don't show up. And to not think of those as potential voters, to think of them as almost like non-entities in the race is so frustrating, which is, I think, why I sort of, 4 years ago, what I did is pivoted my interest in voter outreach to just pure voter outreach and not partisan voter outreach, because I felt like getting voters' voter information was more important than knocking doors for specific candidates. And I think what we saw in some of these states that Biden flipped is that there were campaigns that were focusing on that kind of outreach that were what got him over the edge. And when you talk about some of these, talk about Detroit turning out, I mean, that's Rashida Tlaib's district. That is an area where organizers have been working for a really long time to get people who did not feel invested in the process because they didn't feel like the process served them to the polls. And that is the result of progressive activists. That's not the result of like the DNC and like some kind of, very Amy McGrathy kind of candidate coming in.
And we also have seen, and we saw this in the primaries, and I think that we're going to see, some of the data bear this out from this election too. We know that some of, the door knocking really, that sort of in-person peer-to-peer is really helpful a lot of times in, the types of communities that we really want to get out the vote, specifically the Latino community. The fact that that wasn't going on in Florida is probably in large part why he failed so miserably there when he was polling much better than he was. So
it's also why Sanders had those weird surges during the primaries in states like Texas and Nevada. They had a big operation on the ground in those states. Remember, I mean, Brennan and I went to the Nevada caucuses, and there were like more Bernie Sanders volunteers at those caucuses than there were voters. It was like the whole state was overrun by Bernie Sanders volunteers.
Well, and this is something that Dems somehow stupidly refused to learn. I mean, if you look at AOC, the way she won is that her team built a tool, because Van only goes to people who have voted, and they specifically did outreach to people who've never voted before. So something like 85% of the people who voted for AOC were new voters, right? And like everywhere you go, you see that the people who, because now that's like, you know, a thing Justice Democrats is doing, it's how Jamal Bowman won, it's how all of these people are winning, is that they're going to new voters. And somehow establishment Dems don't get that, you know? And like I almost broke my phone because Jen O'Malley Dillon, in an interview, every interview with her made me want to break my phone. But in one of them, she was like, oh, knocking on doors is old fashioned and it's not needed anyways. We're just going to run a Zoom campaign. And I was like, well, F you. Because first of all, we know the only thing that really works is knocking on doors. But I work with a group of people of whom 77% have never voted before and only 1% have access to a phone. And so when you're saying you're not going to go in person, what you're saying is F these people, we don't need them to vote.
Totally.
What you're also saying is I'm okay with losing or barely winning because I can look at all of the people who are winning elections by enormous margins and, by the way, kicking the asses of old moderate Democrats like the one I'm trying to run, and I'm not going to do any of the things they're doing because I think I'm better than that.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, it reinforces, you know, the idea that the party has an investment in disenfranchising certain voters, that's a party investment. That's not just a system investment, which is, I think, going to be a conversation that we can finally have because we have voices on the left who are willing to articulate it this time, which is very different than how this has worked in past cycles. So that's exciting. And, you know, when we look at the states that Biden flipped, these are states that have very specifically been targeted by just this kind of activism. You know, I mean, the fact that he is now like ahead in Georgia by an amount that is getting to be non-recountable territory. Like, I mean, they can do the recount, but I mean, like, it's getting to be an amount that they're not going to find new ballots to.
Right. When he was only ahead by 600 votes, you're like, okay, well, maybe like a recount is going to be crazy here because who knows what could happen. But he's like ahead by over 10,000 votes or almost 10,000 votes right now, which is like, it just keeps getting larger with every vote that they count because all the mail-in ballots are for him. So
Right. When we saw this, I mean, honestly, you know, I think we're probably going to forget about it because, you know, we saw Alabama's Senate seat flip back. But we did see in that Doug Jones election that if you actually just go and try to engage new voters in the process, you can flip the reddest of seats in.
Well, it helps if you're running against.
Well, it helps if you're running against a lunatic,
known pedophile who is thrilled to be you on.
The idea that like any of these seats are just lost causes. I mean, I think that's why everyone is so excited about Stacey Abrams, because she went in and was like, "You guys, we could win Georgia. Georgia is a real thing. That there are Democrats in Georgia." And you know, for years the party had just been essentially ignoring Georgia as if it didn't exist in the world. You know, and it took somebody being like, hey, maybe I'll show that there's actual potential in Georgia for us to be like, oh, maybe we should invest in Georgia. We should do that everywhere.
Well, the numbers bear it out. This is, thank God I wasn't on Twitter this year. Best decision I ever made. But pre-Twitter, one of the many fights that I was constantly getting in with white Democrats is they were like, we have to try to win back Republicans or we can't win. And I was like, well, you could actually look at the stats of the country. That is absolutely not true.
Right, you don't have to do that.
In Mississippi, Alabama, Texas, Florida, Georgia, all of those states are actually incredibly blue if everyone could vote and if we work to get all of those votes out. It's just that Dems don't want to, because if all of those people voted, they're not voting for Pelosi's, they're voting for AOC's.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I think that is why it is in their interest to pretend like, you know, they're Minnesota and Michigan and all of these states were just sort of like won by, you know, practical centrist arguments as opposed to, you know, Ilhan out there with I was going to say a door knocker. That's not a kind of thing. A door knocker is on the door. It's not on your hand.
I mean, she could have carried around a door knocker.
I don't know if she carried a door knocker.
No, but this is, I mean, we've talked about the fact that this result is actually exactly what Biden wants because he can't get anything done and he doesn't want to do anything because God forbid he should, you know, give us like Medicare for all or anything. So this is what they want. You know, I just saw an article where they were saying like defense contractors are not worried about Biden. They know Biden well. Biden's a good friend of theirs. You know,
we're definitely going to head to war somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. You know, they're not gonna change Wall Street, right? Like he doesn't have to do anything, which is the result they want.
Yeah. Well, and it's going to be interesting too because because Biden is going to win Georgia and clearly the votes are there, you know, he may end up having a a 50-50 Senate. I think
Right.
people think that maybe it's a long shot to get both of those. Who knows, though? I don't know. But, I mean, it's almost, you wouldn't be surprised to hear if he was privately telling people he would prefer that there was divided government.
Oh, well.
I wouldn't.
Oh,
I wouldn't.
No, I expect that he is.
Right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's, and I
Just think of all the deal making he can do. That's what he promised us, right? Republicans are gonna Mitch McConnell
reach across
and
the
he are
aisle.
gonna be friends if the Republicans have the Senate. I'm sure.
It would be really delicious. This won't happen, but it's still in my dream because you know what? Alaska's not bothering to count their votes, so we can dream about Alaska all we want because we'll never find out who won the election there. If
Are you tired of Dr. Al, Kat?
No, I am tired of looking up Alaska and just seeing 56%.
56%.
They decided
For like
to go
4
hunt
days.
moose for a few months. Like they haven't counted a single vote in Alaska for 5 days.
no,
Right,
they
and there
literally
can't be
counted them on
either.
election day, and then
I
they
know.
were like,
And
"We
then
did
they
it."
were like, We've got 56%. We're good. Who needs more than that? It's
Yeah, we did
driving
it.
me insane.
I am desperate for Al Gross to have a surprise win there for many reasons, but among them the fact that it makes Joe Biden's life just like that much more complicated. And because also Al Gross is like wacky. I mean, he's
Yeah, who knows what
he's
he's gonna
progressive. He's not trying to be in there just like he's a man. He's killed a bear, according to Democrats. So, I feel like that's a man who looks for action. That's I want to see some action. And I also what I want is, by the way, we're going to talk about the Senate in a second, but the strategy, in case anyone is listening, is we need to make sure all the money goes to Warnock. John Ossoff is a professional money waster. He is a man who has had a war chest.
Known loser, John.
Known
Ossoff.
loser and also professional money waster. He is the Amy McGrath of Georgia. He is not somebody who is going to spend your money wisely.
And here's how you know. So I unfortunately was in Georgia during the GA6 battle, and it was a nightmare for everybody. Georgians have never been so unhappy. But they spent trillions of dollars on this smug, smarmy little white guy who didn't even live in the district. It was, everyone's attention was on it. The world was watching. He lost. He just got trounced.
I trounced.
2 years later, 1 year later, Lucy
Right.
McBath easily won.
The
With
seat
far
could
less
not have
money.
been an easier win for a real
Right.
candidate.
Yeah.
Easier. Like, he is not a guy who can win.
Right.
This is like Amar, who needs to stop running, right?
He's the Julia Brownlee of this cycle.
My pillow, not even my best pillow, my flat pillow that I haven't gotten rid of yet could beat Daryl Issa in a race. But Amar keeps running and keeps raising money, and he can't. Some people just cannot win. And so Warnock, great chance, great candidate.
Right.
I think incredible.
Right.
Ossoff,
And Kelly Loeffler is a
is a
Is not great.
sitting duck.
loser.
not great.
I tried to convince my family of this earlier, but I'm trying to convince all of America of this. Warnock can maybe drag Ossoff over the line, but it doesn't work in the other direction. You need
No.
Warnock to be the one who's winning. And
He
then
needs to
maybe
have
people
enough
will
money
show
to
up and
run
also
a competent campaign
Right.
to win for the both of the pair of them.
exactly. He's the one who can win for the both of them, but Ossoff cannot drag him across the line because Ossoff's not a real candidate.
himself, yeah.
So he can't even drag himself across the line. So if you have money to donate to those races,
To Warnock.
give it to Warnock and let him do the work for both of them because he's the only one we can trust.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
Anyway, I'm going to say it again
Yeah,
probably
even if
in our Senate
you're-
section.
Even if you're an Ossoff fan, which we need to talk about your life choices, then, but if you really want him to win, give your money to Warnock because Ossoff
Yes.
has already proven to you he cannot win. And I was on the ground. I knew his campaign team. Like, he does not choose good teams.
Of course not.
There is nothing that he does well. He also treats brown activists in Georgia very badly. So, but if
Fantastic.
you really like him and you want him to win, Warnock is the one who can do it.
He's the one. He's the one who actually has like a pitch to make to Georgians about how he would serve them in the Senate and is like a known person in Georgia. He's not just like, first of all, I have an issue because I have John Ossoff face blindness. I've probably talked about it on the podcast before. I can't retain his face no matter how hard I try. I don't know why that is, but I feel like that I must not be the only person afflicted. So if you
I can't
want,
get it out of my head. I don't understand how you can.
I like literally every
know.
time I look at him, it's like I'm looking at a person I've never seen before. I don't
But
know
have,
what
but
to.
have seen every day for your entire
Right.
life also.
I mean, I've been having to look at pictures of him for years, and I just can't retain his face no matter how hard I try. And I don't. It's like the Chris's, the actor Chris's. Like
Which
I have
also,
a little.
They're all
They have
so
face
different.
blindness with them as
They
well.
all look very different.
They're also different. But I have Connor Lamb just existence blindness.
Yes.
Oh, but Connor Lamb and John Ossoff are like a similar genre of person.
Very similar genre of face blind adjacent people.
Yeah.
See, yeah, Connor Lamb, I think more memorable name, and but I can't. If you made me pick the two of them out of a lineup of generic like white brunette guy, I would never be able to find them.
No.
And so I think donate your money to the person who you can remember the face of, if nothing else. In any case, okay. So Trump, he is now ahead by over 40,000 votes in Pennsylvania. He's ahead by like 10,000 votes
Biden.
in Georgia.
Biden.
Biden. Sorry.
Yeah.
God.
I was like, wait.
No.
Are we redrawing the map?
No. We're still at 20,000 in Arizona. I don't know what's going on. Arizona's been a real roller coaster. I'm glad we don't need Arizona anymore because I'm stressed by them.
It's fine, though, because there's still not enough votes at the rate that Trump is.
Yeah.
You're right. It doesn't ultimately matter,
Well, and
but like Biden is also going to win Arizona.
Mark Kelly won, and that's really all that I cared about. Because, and I just found out, I can't believe I was the last person in America to find out he's a twin.
I don't know
I
what
love
rock
twins.
you've been living under and how they did a whole year-long space twin experiment.
I'm
Lila.
not-
How did you miss this?
I'm not
How did you
plugged into the space
Okay,
people.
first of all, get your life together and plug into NASA on all channels at all times. But it was a huge thing. It was a huge thing, and I still can't believe you didn't
It's
know.
so disappointing. I love twins.
I know, that's your thing.
It's my thing.
They're space twins. They're the
They're
coolest kind
space
of twins.
It's unbelievable to me. But in any case, I couldn't be more excited to have him in the Senate just on that basis.
Wait, are they identical?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he has an identical twin. Can you believe I didn't know he had an identical twin? Like a
Identical
fraternal twin.
Astronaut twin. And there
Yeah.
are no greater human beings than astronauts. So they should just get everything anyways. And astronaut twins.
I mean, that's everything you're looking for in life.
It really is.
It's-
It doesn't get better.
A tragedy that I was not informed of this earlier, but I plan to be the most informed person in America about their twindom going forward. So just be prepared for that. Nevada spawned a million memes with their lack of speedy counting.
So good.
This is literally a state where there is like a job for people. Like it's a casino state. Like counting is a literal job there. They have people who are professionals at counting much more complicated situations than
also,
this.
there's only one county in the entire state where humans live.
The rest of it is just like desert rats. So I don't know what could have been so difficult about this, but they really love the drama. Mm-hmm. Like Alaska, they really wanted to bask in the glory of being the center of a brief amount of attention.
Well, nobody cares about them anymore, so.
Right, now that Pennsylvania's won, they've lost their chance.
Right.
And they could have had a great chance. Mm-hmm. And so North Carolina is the only state where we like truly are never going to know anything because they're waiting like 12 days for look, do it.
Right.
Wait.
I mean, and let's blame all of this on Cunningham.
Yes.
And his
sure.
Another
embarrassingly awkward sexting.
I mean, if you're going to be sexting, at least be good at it.
I mean, come on. It was, I think about it and I still cringe. And it would have been less embarrassing had it been explicit. But it sounds so cool
I'm
and
almost
so hot.
wondering, would he have won or would he have lost by less if he didn't? I feel like that scandal immediately became the most interesting thing about Cal Cunningham.
Well, that's true.
Yes.
He had a little bit of a Bruce Braley energy to him, which was part of his problem. Speaking of Bruce Braley, Teresa Greenfield, another person who did not win, even though she had a brief moment of knowing the price of corn or whatever it was.
Yep.
I feel like
But that
Cal
is another
Cunningham-
example of like Teresa Greenfield in Iowa, which granted has been going Republican hard for a while, but also has a progressive streak in terms of like at least Democrats that are voting and like actually getting excited about candidates through there. We have continued to, Teresa Greenfield has never held elected office before. She's like in
stranger.
real estate or something like that. And, the DSCC came through and just sort of like anointed her, the candidate there when there were other good candidates who were running that also had endorsements from labor and things like that. And like, it just didn't, I think people sort of like got excited about the idea that she could win, but also like Teresa Greenfield was never going to win.
That's literally Tom Harkin's seat. Like,
Yes.
she could, like, people could be doing something
Yes.
there. But that's the sort of the ongoing tragedy of North Carolina is it's always just on the cusp of having better representation, and then
Right.
it's thwarted. Doesn't matter by who. It's always thwarted by someone.
Well, I believe their Democratic governor was reelected
Yeah.
in North Carolina.
At the
right?
same,
Yeah.
in the moment, like, there are people that went to the polls and, like, voted for Democratic governors and then also go to the polls and are like, maybe we should reelect Tom Tillis. Like, don't reelect Tom Tillis. That's never
Right.
Well, they did that. Like, so Lila works with my 501c4, and we endorsed this awesome woman who was running for county commissioner in rural North Carolina, and there were 3 positions, and there were 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans running, and somehow they managed to elect a Democratic governor and all 3 Republicans for the county commission.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Like,
What are you
don't.
doing?
Well, I feel like I have, like, a feeling that, like, North Carolina voters are sort of suffering from, like, a weird kind of PTSD from just living in, like, the worst state of gerrymander that anyone has ever experienced. And so I feel like I'm giving them my patience this time, because this is, like, the first time that, like, in a long time that there's been, like, an opportunity to have a good idea, I feel like, on the ballot there. And I'm just hoping that I have a feeling there will be better organizers in there next time because it's so close. You know, I think that was what we saw. Like, it took someone showing that it's close in Georgia for organizers to really take seriously that there was an opportunity there. And I think that is, North Carolina needs that, like, those kind of organizers to be not just on the ground. I'm sure there are organizers on the ground there that are doing this work. Obviously there are, because there have been people fighting the gerrymandering situation there. But to get national focus for doing that work is a different thing. And I think that is what I'm kind of like, if this is really close and close enough that it looks like there is an opportunity for statewide Democrats to pick up stuff, for us to pick up Senate seats, that we will see some different kinds of national attention go, instead of just us worrying about how they're gerrymandered and they don't have, their House representation is all wonky because, the House districts are drawn in such a hilariously bizarre manner. But I'm hoping that there will be some similar attention to the statewide aspirations of Democrats there in the way that we saw happen in Georgia, which is, you guys, it doesn't matter what year it is. The 50-state strategy is always it.
Always.
Howard Dean's brainchild remains the best governing philosophy of any political party that hopes to do literally anything with their lives. Like,
Well, and again, choose someone exciting. Cal Cunningham was another boring white dude.
yes,
Totally.
The most boring white scandal ever, right? Like, if they could have easily found a great, progressive, exciting woman who would have won, because that is what we're seeing everywhere. So this,
Exactly.
again, is just Dems not learning the lesson.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that was the whitest scandal I've ever witnessed in my life? Like, something about it is just like so like cringingly like
Because it's
awkward.
like sexting with your dad. Like,
Yes.
it was so uncomfortable.
It was just a nightmare. Anyway, let this be our reminder to you also that the states that are taking forever to count are taking forever to count largely because of Republican state legislatures not allowing them to count before that, not because they aren't capable of counting as people.
Right.
I don't know. Nevada.
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah,
Besides-
not in every instance. Certainly
Right.
certainly in Pennsylvania.
And
Pennsylvania.
Alaska, it's just because they've gone hunting. So
Alaska
excluding Alaska and Nevada, everybody
Alaska
else
is not used to anyone awaiting their results on any of this.
Right.
Like, Alaska, I feel like, has been doing their own thing. They have puppets soliciting money.
Look, it's our greatest state. I've been all 50, and I can tell you, Alaska, by far the greatest state. But not so great with the there's no urgency, because it doesn't really need to be, because it's
No,
Alaska.
Yeah.
It takes like a week to get your mail from like your house to the post office there. Like, I feel like what are they so busy with? They have
Right.
They are
the
dog-sledding.
splendors of nature await them.
Right.
And then beyond that, they're just like hanging out. They're in Canada, so they're not like, having to deal with all of this nonsense.
They're looking at Russia a lot.
They're
Just, like,
right from their
gazing-
windows. They're
gazing
seeing
from their
Russia.
houses and just
Right,
seeing
they point at
That
Russia
takes
a lot.
of time, just
That's
looking
true.
at Russia.
But certainly in Pennsylvania, the Republican state legislature actively was trying to not count the votes before the election, specifically to be able to have it drag out, which would potentially give Donald Trump and his, legal team, air quotes, legal team.
The legal
Time
team.
to call it into question, which is exactly what happened. But of course, the margin is too high now, and Donald Trump's dream team of legal.
Masterminds.
I don't lawyer. I mean, they're lawyers, I guess technically.
Legal technical
of
lawyers.
Rudy Giuliani and Pam Bondi, by the way. Like, I mean, there was a report on. Well, I'm sure everywhere, but CNN was reporting anyway that like the White House was like talking about how they were unhappy with their legal team, and it was like, oh, really? And then they were talking to sort of like some Republican lawyers who had like tried the 2000 Florida recount and stuff like that, and they were all basically just sort of like, look, if there was a case, then like lawyers would love to help him try it because that's what
Lawyers love making money
Yes.
by fighting on cases.
Well, the
Yeah.
Michigan ruling was fantastic because the judge said, the only thing that you've brought me is some woman during counting heard somebody say that somebody said that they weren't allowing observers. So you brought me hearsay with no evidence. It doesn't
Right.
follow any of the hearsay exceptions, which is the worst day of law school is learning those. And he was like, you literally brought in a woman gossiping to my courtroom. Get the F out. And I was cracking up reading that ruling because that's all it is. Every single state, they have nothing except like, well, somebody heard something.
Right.
Yeah,
Even
somebody
in
heard.
Pennsylvania, which was a case that they ended up winning, where they got their election watchers like closer or whatever. They were still in the room. They were still there. It's not as if they were like somehow being like locked out of the room, like while some crazy shenanigans went on with the vote.
Nefarious counting shenanigans.
They were there. That's so crazy. And that's the one that they're all pointing to as like the big victory that they got also, by the way.
Right.
Like that's the one court victory they've got was that
The
their election watchers like in one polling or in one counting place in Philadelphia are now like physically closer to where the voting is. Like that's their big victory.
That won it for Biden.
Right.
Yeah.
They got a better view of them counting all of those Biden votes.
A better view
Which,
of losing.
Trump did this to himself. You can't spend 3 months telling people not to mail in their ballots and then be shocked when none of your people didn't mail in ballots and then like stand there and be like, well, we have to watch these mail in ballots because this is suspicious. Pull the tape. We have it on video.
I texted Lila at one point this week, and I'm curious your take on this, Kat, because, and I'm not using this as a reason to give Trump a pass on this, but I am wondering if there is a chance that his brain literally is just not computing why all of the mail-in vote, like why all of the votes that have been counted after Tuesday have been for Joe Biden and he's losing. Like, is there a chance that like
he just truly
literally
doesn't
is not
understand
making sense of how this played out?
First of all, Trump's brain computes very little.
Right,
but,
exactly.
He doesn't understand consequences because he's never really experienced them. So actually, Mary Trump, all of our favorite, niece, in an article either yesterday or today, she said the thing about this that is going to be the most difficult for Trump is that he either cheats and wins, or he cheats and he loses, but he wins anyways, right? Like he bankrupted every business he's ever had. He's still a millionaire, right? He's still like, no matter what he does, he always wins because there are always people there and safety nets there to prop him up. So this is a loss and he doesn't understand it. And this is why, like, I have a hard time. Like, he's got so many issues. And there's so many things that he just can't comprehend. And I'm like, look, my problem isn't with Trump. My problem is with all the people around Trump who won't take his phone away and who enable him and who actually do have, sort of nefarious interests. But Trump is just being the guy he's been since he was a kid, and he's never faced consequences. So it never occurred to him that, if I tell people not to mail in their ballots and we're in the middle of a pandemic, then they're not going to mail in their ballots for me, but the other guy's telling them to, so they're going to mail in ballots for him. Like, he never did that math, and now all he sees is himself losing, but he doesn't understand because, well, why does someone just cheat? Or why doesn't my dad just illegally give me $1 million in casino chips? Or why doesn't someone do something that will still allow me to win? Because that has always happened. This is just a man who doesn't understand consequences. He was impeached and he's still in the White House, right? He's been breaking the law for 4 years with no consequences. He does not understand what's happening. He just doesn't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also very satisfying to watch someone who just like doesn't understand how consequences work like slowly face them in this excruciatingly slow manner.
His face walking into the White House after he had to drive through
Oh my God.
the protest.
After golfing, of course.
I will frame that and put it on my wall. That is
so good.
like the favorite picture, my favorite picture of all time.
Yeah.
Because he's been facing sort of like random one-off versions of this for a while. Like he knows that there's that there are these protests going on. I think that he probably has like imagined that they're not really about him. They're about something else. The people don't understand something, or that they're not really protesting him, his presence. It's like they don't like a thing that he did or whatever. Like he's never thought about, I'm sure, the fact that it is very much just about like people dislike him. He is the head of the dragon. Everyone else who works for him we cannot have another sort of Nixon situation where they all work in politics forever and become like, right, it'll happen, but it shouldn't happen. But I mean, he is sort of the head of the dragon in that without the head, there just isn't this same sort of like disregard for protocol. I mean, it's like they're still up to the same horrible shenanigans. It's not like it's not like there aren't people in the Senate who are essentially white nationalists who are legislating on an essentially white nationalist platform. Like that is, of course, always the case. But without someone to be able to, to sort of cover for them by doing everything so brazenly, they have to go back to being the kinds of, polite racists that Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III was when he was in the Senate, where he was sort of like a genteel racist, where he was openly racist and everyone knew it, but he wasn't like shouting weird shit at crowds and stuff. He was couching it in legalese, and he was couching it in respectability politics and all of these things, which is what all of those people were accustomed to doing before this. Mm-hmm. And I feel like because of that, Trump doesn't understand why he's different than those people either. He doesn't understand why they sort of like got away with that for so long, and he's just saying what they're saying. I mean, in some ways, it's sort of like part of it is just that he doesn't understand the nuance of why what he's communicating is working differently than, the way that they were communicating it on half the country, and why it's working so well on the other half. Like he's got like a lizard brain thing for like being really good at this sort of like weird brand of like celebrity politics. Mm-hmm. But I feel like he also doesn't see why what he's been doing has been a little different than the genteel racists of the past, of the, the sort of the way that white nationalism has always existed inside the Senate, and should I think maybe part of the frustration of having like a Joe Biden in there is that we would like to see someone actually address some of these issues like on the genteel side as well. Like it would be nice if there were not.
I think you've seen it before, because like Trump really did not understand, and I think Lila, you have seen this more closely being a New Yorker, but like he really didn't understand the difference between him and other millionaires and billionaires.
Yes.
And he did
Totally.
not understand why New York society didn't like him and didn't accept him. And it's so freaking obvious to everyone else. Bill Gates doesn't have a gold toilet, right? Like it's so obvious, but he really doesn't get. He's like, well, I went to Wharton and I'm all these things. He doesn't understand how different he is and how he presents himself so differently. And like, no, there's a reason people with class hate you, right? And it's the same exact thing that you're saying with Republicans. Like and look, you see this with a lot of people. You see this with a lot of social climbers. We live in LA and New York, two places where you have plenty of people who don't get that they're only seeing sort of the fashion magazine side of things, and they don't actually understand how things work. And so they don't get why they're not fitting into a career or society, or why things aren't going the way for them that others do. And Trump is sort of this extreme version of that, because he doesn't have any ability to self-reflect, and he doesn't. I mean, there's really something like weird about his world vision, because he can't look at someone else and see, oh, this is the way they speak and do their hair and tan and whatever else, right? Like the fact
certainly he's not taking any clues on the tanning front.
And that's the thing.
Right.
This is a man who, for this many years and 4 years in the White House, has continued to wear that weird orange tan
and
with
that
the
tie.
white eyes, right? Like he cannot look at himself and look at other people and accurately compare. But he doesn't get that, right? He doesn't understand that he's not seeing it accurately.
Right.
I've often thought that one thing that really explains a lot of what's going on in like federal politics right now is actually just like a battle between Brooklyn and Queens that the whole nation got dragged into. And that part of it is that Trump is from like of the era, you know, like there's Queens now, and Queens now is actually a very exciting place. There's also Queens from Trump Queens, and that Queens was a less exciting place and more like a Nixon-y kind of place. And Trump, I feel like, doesn't understand why there is this, you know, there is an example of a New Yorker populist leader in Bernie Sanders who doesn't have this kind of animosity directed towards him. Like, people don't like his politics, but he's consistently rated one of the most trustworthy politicians in America. Like, there is not this same sense. People wouldn't dance in the streets if he, you know, lost the office. And so I think that Trump doesn't understand also the borough battle he's in, where there's just like more credibility in being from Brooklyn in the era that they are from than there is in being from Queens. There's just like, and Chuck Schumer, same thing. Because Chuck Schumer and Bernie Sanders and Ruth Bader Ginsburg all went to the same high school.
That's quite a high school.
Did we all see Chuck Schumer dancing and
unfortunately
the other day?
Yeah,
a very
I never
unfortunate
got that out of my head.
outcome. There's
Don't watch it.
been a lot of unfortunate dancing the last, because that Trump video that he tweeted just before losing, where his 2 minutes of dancing to YMCA with his fingers. I mean, that is the longest video in American history, first of all.
Hours long.
Oh my God.
Second of all, it's just so uncomfortable.
Totally.
Everything about it.
And the
Nightmare.
fact that and again, he retweeted that. He thought,
Nope.
this is a video of me
His
looking
team made it.
awesome dancing. I'm going to tweet this out. Like, this
Right.
is a man who just, there's something wrong with his mirror. I'm so curious about how he sees the world and himself and how it is twisted.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Because it's
Yeah.
so obvious to everybody else.
Well, I do wonder if, to some extent, everyone's, like, the media's willingness to keep covering him and everyone's sort of continued willingness to, like, discuss him is largely just related to a national fascination with how a person like Trump can be.
Well, that was certainly the case in 15.
I mean, that's how he got onto the radar in the first place.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, the idea that once he had been declared the loser, suddenly all of his crazy Twitter rantings seemed so small and so silly and so ridiculous in a way that, look, they've always been ridiculous, but they haven't seemed small. They seemed scary before this.
Well,
and
they were dangerous before.
And they were dangerous. And what he tweeted was still dangerous. I mean, he was undermining the election and tweeting it. But something about knowing that he hadn't won made it suddenly seem so insignificant and small. And I was like, oh, like, I have been stuck in this mentality where he had all this power over me, in part because he had all this power, but also because I was like caught in like this weird fascination with him as well that everyone has been caught in, because that's why everyone breathlessly reports on his every move. It's not because he's not been up to much, even though he talks a big game. You know, like he's tried to do executive orders that are never legal, so they never get enforced. He's like done things that are specifically designed to like make everyone angry periodically, but beyond, it's not like he's been like busy solving crises abroad or anything. Like, he hasn't been doing much as the president. He mostly golfs. And so the idea that we constantly are like breathlessly reporting on his every move has to be about him. It's not about
it's reality TV.
his administration.
Yeah.
It's reality TV, exactly.
It's just
And
been
I feel like we almost like part of what was exciting about Saturday is that finally broke through. Like, I was finally like, oh, he is like a person who has no power if we don't give it to him, which is what you want in a democracy. But it's almost like he had been like just breaking the law left, right, and center. It felt like we didn't have any way to rein him in.
Right.
This was the only way.
This was the only way.
We couldn't count on congressional Democrats to do it.
Certainly not. They kept tweeting at us, asking us to do it,
Right.
as if we were somehow.
Right.
The Trump campaign ended in exactly the right way.
Yeah. And it is. I mean, and I think that what's going to be great. First of all, it was glorious that Fox News was the first outlet to call Arizona.
So good.
I mean,
Like, that was perfect. And
that's
the-
why I
Correctly,
started
too.
issuing my own calls, because I thought
Correctly.
Fox News is out here.
Right. And I mean, I think that both it was perfect, but also because so many people were afraid of, oh, he's going to refuse to leave office, blah blah blah. And I'm like, have you seen Donald Trump for the last 4 years? This is not a man with a backbone. This is not a man, first of all, who would try anything extreme, but also he's spent the last 4 years crapping all over the military and Secret Service and getting the Secret Service COVID. They hate him. Like, you can't have a coup with people who frickin' hate him.
Who's going to do the coup?
The Secret Service, I guarantee you right now, they are like pulling straws, hoping to be the ones who get to kick his ass out of office, right? They hate him. So, like, that was never a concern, but I think that, having Fox call Arizona first and having, when we had Chris Christie and Shapiro and all of these really atrocious people going on television and saying, Trump is being ridiculous right now and this is unacceptable and he has no reasons for saying the things he's saying and the process is working the way it's supposed to be, that was also, proof that, he's got nobody with him except like Rudy and Eric, who even he doesn't care about Eric, right? And like, you saw, and you see now they're jumping ship like rats. Fox
we knew they
immediately called the election when everybody else did and started calling Biden President-elect Biden, and even talked about the historic nature of Kamala's win. Like, it was just this immediate realization that, he is completely powerless because everybody on all sides, we don't agree on anything else, but we do agree on a peaceful transition of power.
Yeah, and even Fox came around on that because there was actually some reporting that there was some internal discussion at Fox as to whether they would be calling Biden President-elect Biden after calls were made. But then, like you said, they just immediately started.
Saturday morning. And so now, his tweets are so pathetic, but also like, yeah, fine. He's going to pardon like everybody and their mother over the next 70 days. He's going to write more useless executive orders that we can just throw away because they're not
probably going to try and
anything.
pardon himself. If he can figure out a way to
1,000% going to try to. He'll have Rudy write some sort of legal memo in crayon. Like he's going to try some things, but it's going to look really impotent and pathetic. Yeah. Because he no longer has power, which is the beauty of a lame duck presidency anyways, right? But I think that it's exactly the loss he deserves, but it's the loss we need. We need to watch him look like an impotent clown for 2 months.
Yeah, it's going to make us feel great.
And then he won't be at the inauguration, right? He won't do any of the transition stuff, which is great because we could just pretend.
Well, because who wants him there? We don't want to pretend like he was a legitimate president.
And he's not going to be able to share any information with the Biden campaign that is going to be useful to the Biden campaign.
They've been briefing him with pictures for 4 years. He doesn't know anything.
I know. Speaking of Rudy Giuliani, though, can we please talk about the Four Seasons?
The moment that it all comes crashing down is the most fitting moment that's ever been bestowed on any group of people who are evil or not evil in all of America.
Nothing has ever made me this happy.
First of all, the Trump campaign thought that they should, on Saturday morning, hold a press conference to declare themselves once again the winners.
In Philadelphia.
And Trump said it would be taking place at the Four Seasons Philadelphia, which is a place.
Right,
and everyone thought
specifically that's where it was going to be.
The Four Seasons Philadelphia. What he failed to mention in that tweet is that he was not referring to the hotel because, he did not fail to mention.
He thought he was.
He thought he was referring to the hotel.
There's some confusion here, and look, I am looking forward to the congressional investigation of what happened.
Yes.
But either
the Four Seasons press conference.
He knew that it wasn't the Four Seasons Hotel, but he wanted everyone to think it was, or he thought it was.
I guarantee that he just said Four Seasons, and then they couldn't do it at the Four Seasons, and everyone had to just scramble.
Yes.
And so instead, they held it at the Four Seasons Total Landscaping.
Like
which
in
is
between like
the landscaping.
Like a crematorium and like a dildo shop, basically.
That's right. So Rudy is standing at the Four Seasons Total Landscaping in Philadelphia.
In the back lot.
Right.
Oh yeah, like the
parking lot of Four Seasons
in the alley.
Yeah, guys, if you haven't seen this, if you haven't seen the pictures or the video of this, you must.
I mean, get your life together.
Right.
He's standing there, busily declaring themselves, that they're going to recount everything and Trump will win or whatever. And that is the moment, right next to the dildo store, where Rudy is told that Donald Trump, that CNN has called the race for Joe Biden.
Well, it wasn't the CNN,
actually,
though.
no, because they said, they've called the race for Biden, and Rudy says, who called it? And they said, all the networks.
Okay.
Right, and then he looks up and he goes, "Oh, all the networks." Oh man!
But then, when it became clear that this had all been a blunder, because obviously it was a mistake, and obviously they meant to do it at the real Four
this
Seasons.
is my favorite part of the entire.
They all
story,
tried to
I'm pretty
backpedal. So Corey Lewandowski tweeted, "All great Americans in Pennsylvania use Four Seasons social." I love this
really-
country and our American patriots.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
look, you have to. That's like I'm gonna give them credit for like their commitment to this bit.
They-
right? Like, this is as our friend Grant Sloss. I think I stole that from actually yesterday. It was just sort of
Right.
like, that is like true.
It is.
That's true commitment to.
That's
Taking
commitment to the bit.
all the
to
way.
the bit. Yeah.
All the way.
Yes.
Oh my God. The loyalty, like this is the other, because then and you got like Kaylee McKayleeson or whatever her name is, like all these
McEnany.
people who are like the loyalty that
Kelly
it takes.
McKayleeson.
That's as far as I know, that's her name. The commitment to this clown who can't tan correctly. That you think, you know what I need to do in front of the entire world? Pretend that this landscaping thing was on purpose. And you could just not tweet. Corey Lewandowski could have just
Just
not
don't say
said
anything. Let
But
people
he
speculate.
Somehow, like, feels such loyalty to this man that he's like, this is a thing I have to do. Like, what is happening?
I know.
That
Oh, man.
couldn't have been a more appropriate
So perfect.
end to the Trump campaign, and what I hope will be the most. I hope that's what we remember as the end of the Trump era too.
Right.
It's like Rudy Giuliani in front of the Four Seasons Total Landscaping business next to a dildo store, just
Yeah.
looking to the heavens,
Well, that's what my favorite meme
screaming
of that.
all the networks.
I mean, my favorite meme of that so far has been, the or how it started and how it's going, sort of,
Right.
with like the
Yes.
Trump inauguration, which still didn't look that impressive, really, anyway. But then, how it's going with the Rudy Giuliani standing at the landscaping, so good. I mean,
Yeah, I honestly,
just
Biden
the
got
best.
the win he deserved and Trump got the loss he deserved.
Totally.
Yeah.
This is one of the few times in history
Justice was
when
served.
white men get what they deserve. And you know what? If 2020 had to put us through 11 months of freaking hell to get us just these two moments, worth it.
Oh my God, it's so true.
So true. So we spoke about the Senate already
Let's
quite a
we're done
bit.
with that, right?
We're done with the Senate, I think.
Yeah, we talked about John Ossoff
I'm
face
gonna-
blindness. That was
no.
really our key takeaway there. So let's
Right. I'm gonna re-articulate just for the people in the back. Give your money to Warnock. Don't
Right.
give a single dime to John
and
Ossoff.
Here's another thing I'll throw in. As a person who runs a grassroots organization
Right.
that actually turns out the vote in Georgia,
Yes.
give your money to, look, I love Stacey Abrams. She's wonderful. But Fair Fight is drowning in money. Give your money to New Georgia Project. Dare I say, spread the vote.
Give your money to spread the vote.
Yes. There are organizations, because the Warnock campaign's going to do campaign stuff. And yeah, they need money for ads and whatever else. You've got organizations, campaigns do what they do. But campaigns do not help people get IDs. They do not help people get rides to the polls. There is, and I don't know, nobody knows this because this just happened, but there is a really short timeline to this election. So the election is on the 5th of January, but early voting starts December 14th, and the voter registration deadline is December 7th.
Yeah,
And
you can
we are-
continue to register just to vote in that election.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're actually currently, we were on Friday and we'll be on Monday talking to the Secretary of State, because no one can figure out what the actual deadline is to request absentee ballots, but you have to re-request absentee ballots in Georgia. So this is all, and right now the Legal Defense Fund is saying November 18th, and we're praying to God that's not the case.
God.
But there is a really short timeline for this and a lot of work that has to be done. So there are going to be over 300,000 17-year-olds that turn 18 in time to register and vote in this election. So there are a lot of groups on the ground that are working to do the work that needs to be done to actually get people to the polls. And I think that people don't sort of realize the different roles that campaigns have versus those grassroots groups.
Yeah.
But it's those grassroots groups who are actually going to do, we take people to the DMV, we get them the IDs they need to vote, we drive them to the polls, all of these things. So when you're looking at who to give to, Warnock is going to be drowning in money. Warnock is going to have more money than any billionaire building his own space agency at the moment. But it's the organizations that do turnout that really need your funds and your support.
I think that's such a great tip, and I think that we should we'll get those links out to you.
Oh yeah, we'll have all of those links on the
Yeah.
podcast description, notes, whatever it's called.
Yep. Love it.
Can we make fun of Dems losing House seats now?
Yeah, that's next. That's next on our agenda. You guys, if you came here to hear us cry about Dems losing House seats, think again because we are going to gloat.
I know. Well, we're not going to gloat.
No, we're gonna gloat to centrists. We're not gloating to the Republic. We're not gloating to America. But
Right.
Listen, we lost a bunch of House seats, and there is already finger pointing going on about how the left somehow caused this, despite the fact that who didn't lose House seats is anyone on the left, and that includes people who flipped districts who are on the left.
Right.
Not only did
Porter did not lose her seat.
Not only did they not lose, but the most progressive candidates added 100,000 voters to their rolls, etc. Like they blew out their opponents and added so many new voters to the rolls that they won those states. They won Michigan and Minnesota for Biden.
Yeah,
exactly.
Totally.
And that is, I think, an important thing to remember as we discuss the infamous Thursday House Democrats call, in which a candidate that I have defended in the past got on the phone, and this got leaked. I'm sure other people did this, but she's the one who kind of got tagged with it. Abigail Spanberger.
What was so delicious about this call was that it was being live leaked.
Yeah, it was being
It
was being
on the call that it was being leaked, and then started talking about who was leaking it and had telling people to stop leaking it, and it was a whole thing. It was amazing.
Yeah. So it's like being basically live tweeted all by every single human on Twitter as Abigail Spanberger gets on the phone and just tears into the Democratic strategy, not because it was a shitty strategy that involved them running on almost nothing and then also losing everything, but because she didn't want to be tarred with the defund the police movement, the movement for Black Lives is really what she was not saying but should have been saying, and then also being called a socialist. And I have some advice for her and all of the centrist Democrats who feel this way, because she's claiming people are really concerned about, her constituents are coming and being worried about people saying defund the police, and they, worried about.
They aren't, by the way.
First of all, they're not.
Not one of her constituents came to her and was like, I'm scared about the defund the police movement. It didn't happen.
No. Here's
didn't happen.
What did happen is that she ran a shitty digital campaign, and that considering she was running to the right of Joe Biden, someone calling her a socialist should have been laughed the fuck off, and then also that person should have been tarred and feathered, because it is insulting to socialists, of which I am one, to be calling Abigail Spanberger a socialist. What they cannot be angry that other people who are Democratic socialists are identifying as such. What she can do as a person who is not one is say, oh, I'm sorry that you think I'm a socialist. I could diffuse the talking point if I were a smart person by saying, well, if you're talking about how I want everyone to have health care, then I guess we're all socialists. There's an easy diffusing talking point, but also we're talking about a campaign that couldn't have had less to do with socialism. It is an insult to socialism to even call her a socialist. So she could just work harder to define herself in her district, which is the point of campaigning. It's not AOC's job to run Abigail Spanberger in Abigail Spanberger's district. It is her job to define herself there.
Yeah, my advice for her and all of the people who are complaining about this would be to find a fucking mirror.
Right. I mean, you've got a presidential candidate who ran on an I love police platform, a pro-fracking platform, and a socialist, never heard of them platform. The presidential candidate for her party was exactly the person she's claiming she wanted.
She's mad that that the word socialism still existed while she was running, basically, because there couldn't have been, first of all, none of the people who identify as DSA or some subsidiary were running even difficult campaigns at this point. So we're talking about, in the general election, a swath of candidates who weren't even fighting hard elections. And that includes some that were supporting, quote unquote, the sort of progressive socialist, ideas like Medicare for all and a Green New Deal in swing districts. Those people were not running such tough races. People who were running tough races because they were running to the right of Joe Biden somehow. And then they were shocked when and running a campaign that had no platform, that they were not getting the same engagement that some of these people who were running on principles we're getting. And then to point the finger at the left after the entire reason they told us we needed Joe Biden was so that they wouldn't have to worry about being called socialists is so infuriating and insulting, and also insulting every time it like hurts me every time someone calls Joe Biden a socialist because of me actually being one. And I wish that I wish that I didn't have the answer to this to the extent that I do, but like we knew this was going to be a strategy the Republicans would employ. Calling people socialists is what Republicans do. You cannot be angry at people for being their essential selves, and Republicans are people who at their most essential base self want to call you a socialist. So go into the debate prepared to be called a socialist, sure. But I don't understand why your response to that is to say, disgusting, I would never have anything to do with those, instead of being like, if you want to talk about policy, I am here. If you want to just make ridiculous, wild accusations, I am not. Like, be on the internet where this discussion is happening to tell people you're not a socialist if you hate it so much. Like,
because they can't do that. I mean, look, I think fundamentally this is jealousy, right? They are
yes.
They're so jealous of AOC they can't stand it. But
yes.
they also and this is, you know, it's very similar to the Trump conversation. They also don't understand why people like her.
Yeah.
And you know, there's no thought. Spanberger didn't have the thought, oh, I should just stand for something and fight for it publicly, and then people will like me too, right? Like, oh, I should do a really good job of calling people out in hearings, right? Like, they could easily all do, oh, I could dress a little better, right? Like, they could all do the things that AOC is doing, but they, won't, because they didn't get into Congress to be change makers, right?
Right.
And to be,
they did it to hold the line.
Right, to be loud voices for their causes. And they cannot handle how much people love AOC. They hate the squad. They're so jealous of them. Nancy is so jealous of AOC. It's shocking. And because of that, they keep doing and saying this stupid shit that honestly just makes them look worse. Because everybody can look and be like, Spanberger, nobody looked at you and said, you're a socialist, right? Like, it's
right.
so absurd. But
They
are just like Trump. Like, they refuse. And this is the same conversation we've been having about Dems all day, and will be for, you know, decades probably, is they just refuse to learn. They cannot look at these people and say, oh, I understand why they're winning, and if we want to win, we have to do this. All they can do is be angry and jealous and try to stop those people, and they don't understand that the train is going and it's rolling right over them.
Right.
Well, and also
not only are they refusing to learn, and you know, I think this was one of the things that was in the AOC tweet storm, which was just amazing after this call happened. But you know, they are like actively refusing. They're doing more than refusing the help. They're like basically they're blacklisting the help, basically, right? Like, I mean, like the people who are like running these great campaigns for these progressive organizations should be being asked, you know, by the D-Trip, like what it is that they're doing that is allowing them to have the success that they're having, but instead they're not just not asking them, they're blacklisting them. They literally like can't work with other candidates because like they might have like at one point thought to themselves that maybe they should run, you know, against a moderate incumbent, and that is cuckoo crazy.
Well, and that's so AOC had not only a great response on Twitter, but also a response. Someone, you know, interviewed her for the Times about this, and her, I mean, the entire interview is just brilliant. I recommend everyone read it because it perfectly diagnoses what the issue is. And she knows that it's jealousy. Like, you can tell that she knows.
Yes.
But she also knows, she said, you know, I went and looked at what these campaigns were actually doing, because it's easy to blame, you know, progressives for you losing your seat, but you also have to wonder what you did as a campaign that made you so susceptible to being called a socialist. Why weren't you able to fend off that attack? She, you know, she said these folks are pointing towards Republican messaging that they feel killed them, right? But why were you so vulnerable to that attack? And she uses Conor Lamb as an example. He did win back his seat, but by the skin of his teeth. She was like, he spent in his last week of campaigning $2,000 on digital advertising. A responsible campaign spends $200,000 on digital advertising. And especially in a pandemic, like, what the hell? But like, these accusations are being made on the internet. That's where they're coming from. they're not being made in diners in your district. They're coming from the internet. The Republican messaging is coming to you from media. So you need to be on media to deflect that. And the thing that these Justice Dems and also, other sort of insurgent candidates know is how to be on the internet. It's how to be effective on media. And, she rightfully points out, like you're saying, you can't blacklist the firms that are the best in the business and then be mad at us when you don't win re-election. You refused our help. She said, she offered help to something like 10 candidates that were in tough races. And the 5 that took her help won re-election, and the 5 that did not win re-election. And the idea that it's somehow like activists that are killing the party instead of just like idiotic campaign practice, which is, by the way, there are 2 things to think about as a campaign. Like as a person in America, you can be like, voters are being idiotic, people are being idiotic, you can be very frustrated with people, you can decide to write off entire groups of people if you want. I mean, as a person in America, you can do all of those things. As a campaign, it is your job to think, what can I do to reach voters? And also to reach those voters where they are. And if you are not willing to do those 2 things, then you are not running an effective campaign. If you are not willing to think to yourself, what power do I have to actually reach people, and instead are just like, why does AOC reach people and I don't reach people? She's a socialist. And also, if you reach those people and those people are progressive organizers who can help you turn out even more people, and you tell those people that you don't want their help, then, and that not only that, but you're not going to be responsive to their needs, so them voting for you or not voting for you means nothing. And so why would young people show up for you in the first place? Like, if you are going to do those things, then you're not going to have an effective campaign. And that's something that I feel like we should have learned in Florida in 2000, actually, because this has always been the basis, the sort of moment where I became aware of how problematic the Democratic Party's mentality about voting is the Florida 2000 race. And it is because instead of thinking, why didn't more people show up for us? They thought, why did all these people show up for Ralph Nader, who barely had any people show up for him? But they didn't think to themselves, what responsibility did we have for this moment? Why was our running mate choice so inappropriate? What did we campaign on?
Well, the same thing happened in 16 too. The exact same thing that you're
and that's
speaking
the
of
exact,
right now.
yeah, that was the sort of beginning of that problem. And the exact same thing happened in 16, where they're like, why did people show up for Jill Stein? Who cares why people showed up for Jill Stein? Why didn't they show up for you? And also, it's not their fault for not showing up for you if you didn't ask for their vote. You have to ask for their vote. And it's like the ongoing D-trip problem. We see.
And this is a specific problem to the Democratic Party also. Because I guarantee you that you could go to every single dark corner of the Republican, dark web right now, and you would not find any single person complaining about Joe Jorgensen.
Right.
No. Well, and they also learned the Trump campaign made all of their staff study the Obama playbook, right? Like, they are willing to learn. Whereas AOC, that tool that she built to help her win in 2018, they built it out and made it available to anybody who wants it. The fact that the D-Trip and DNC didn't immediately adopt it, that it isn't added to van, like, it is widely available. So everybody can actually just do what AOC is doing. You can hire a young person who's good with the internet, and you can use the same exact tools that she uses to win. And you could win if you cared at all about doing what voters need you to do and reaching out to voters as they exist, rather than saying, I'm going to stand here and I expect you to come to me.
Yeah, totally.
That's, God. Guys, we've diagnosed it.
I mean, we know the problem.
Well, and I also, just going back to Abigail Spanberger really quickly, because there were a few things in AOC's tweet storm that I feel like are important that I just want to hit on really quickly. One is that the people that, Spanberger is sort of, accusing of having ruined everything for moderates are also from, the thing about being in the House of Representatives is that you have to represent your own district, right? So it's like Rashida Tlaib represents literally the poorest district in the entire country. So maybe the people of her district want Medicare for all. They also live in a huge, that district also has a lot of water problems that are from environmental issues. So it might behoove them to have, parts of the Green New Deal that make sense, that, might allow them to live healthier lives in the district that they live in. AOC's district has a lot of people who would love to have ICE abolished.
Right.
You know, I mean, like, and so the idea that, like, does she just want them to, like, not
Right.
talk about those things? Because then they are being bad congressmen.
But they never
at
have.
that point.
AOC beat an incumbent who'd been in office for 122 years, and he
Yeah.
never would have brought up abolishing ICE. And this is the problem:
Yeah.
is that they're so used to people towing the party line, and now they have
Yeah.
people who say, "No, I actually care about the people in my district, and I'm going to represent them," and they don't know what to do with that because that
Right.
has never been a thing that they've done.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's not what the
And-
money asks them to do. Because the other thing is that these people have a fundraising operation that makes them
Yeah.
not have to listen to the money. And that is not what these moderate Dems have going. So their interests are not actually their constituents.
Yeah.
They have to think, how do we trick our constituents into voting for us again? They aren't able to think, what could I do to serve my constituents?
Yeah.
Outside of like, maybe I'll bring like broadband to, you know, like that, you
Yeah,
know,
right.
Republicans are like obsessed with bringing broadband to everyone. Like John Kasich has been mentioning
It's
that
how-
all over the internet.
I have been seeing this. Andrew Yang, I think, also has been talking a lot about this also too, because like, if you weren't watching the video, then there was a quality eye roll that you just missed. No, but I mean, I think that is sort of like has become a lot of people's answers on both sides to like get the rural vote back.
Well, it's like, that's, by the way, socialism.
Well, right, exactly.
First of all, socialism. Second of all, people in rural areas would like their fucking hospitals back, please. Like they would
Right,
Well,
like
right,
it's not
exactly.
just
They would like
broadband.
jobs.
Yes.
They would like
Yeah.
their medications to be able to be delivered by the postal service. Like, would broadband be great? Sure, we should all
Yeah.
have it, but that's not what rural voters need.
Right. Yeah.
They're dying.
Right. And then lastly, about, at least for me anyway, if you guys have more points, feel free. But in terms of this Spanberger call, you know, I think that the idea that she would talk about the defund the police issue is
Yeah.
just so disgusting on
It's
so
icky.
many levels. I mean, she should be fired out of a cannon for this because, like, I mean, the idea that you would just sort of like not talk about that, which a thing that like affects the very communities who you expect to come in and save you electorally every time you have an election, and then it's basically she's doing exactly what those communities complain about people doing is they expect me to vote for them, and then they get there and they do nothing, and she's basically advocating for doing nothing right here.
Yeah, well, it's a huge
not only
advocate
doing
of
nothing
black
but like
women.
actively running away
Right.
from those
It's
communities.
a huge, like, and this is the Democratic Party. They will pay
Yeah.
lip service to how we're the ones who constantly say, which we are, because white women sure aren't doing it. That is black women.
So true.
And, and black men are always just right behind us in voting. And, we're the ones who save everyone and, listen to black women. But they still, and they did it again this year, they still don't campaign in our communities until October. And then the day after they win, all of a sudden, everything we want goes out the window. And
It's not the
gross
right
and it's
time.
scary, and it's
Yeah.
not the right time, and it's the reason somebody else lost, and blah blah blah. And like, we're all obsessed with Stacey Abrams, and we're not going to put her on the cabinet or anything, right? Like, it's always an immediate turnaround, and they wonder why we hate them. Why B, they keep winning by the skin
Right.
of our teeth, because we know that if we vote for the other party, we'll die faster. Like,
Yep.
both parties going to kill us. One's going to kill us a little
Right.
faster. And so, like, we do what we have to do, but then they turn around and they do something like this.
Yeah.
And it's like, that was the part for me, like, that just,
Yeah.
it made me
And-
scream.
And what is
Yeah.
even additionally crazy about that type of statement is that if you look, and this was another thing that AOC shared, but if you look at Democratic voter registration this year, you see it sort of like constantly rising through the primaries, as you would sort of expect it to be, and then it either drops or sort of like plateaus. And then do you know when it shot way the hell up this year? It was in June. And
Yeah, it
if
was
you
during the
think
BLM
about
protests.
what was going on in June in the world, you can think to yourself that it was the very movement that she is, shit talking here that actually got enough Democrats registered to vote the president out. So like she should be taken to task.
Also,
She should. And I'm glad you
another
guys said that.
issue where one of the frustrations that I have from just like a messaging standpoint about it is it's like the socialism thing. It's so easy to diffuse because this is a nationwide public health crisis.
Right.
The idea that we are paying people to shoot innocent people in the streets, that's a nationwide public health crisis. And if she could just use that language instead of talking about it in this very charged language, then she wouldn't have to worry if other people want to use the defund the police language. She doesn't have to like like she can figure out how to sell this to her community. I think
But she doesn't want to.
she doesn't want to, and that's and we should not be having to be in league with people who don't want to.
Right.
I mean, this is just like when Biden and Kamala are falling all over themselves talking about how much they love fracking, and again it was AOC who was like, yeah, but you should like
right,
we
but fracking is bad.
Fracking's bad. Everybody hates fracking. Like this is a thing you should just be against, and they can't do it, and it's absurd.
Well, and all of this, it's so, I mean, like we're wondering where we lost all of these working class voters and where all these voters went, and like these are issues that it is actually really easy to explain to people in terms that make it clear how it affects them. It's not hard to explain how fracking is something you don't want. It's not hard to explain why defunding the police is actually like a thing that affects communities positively. It's not hard to explain any of that actually if you just try.
And you know how we know that? Because we passed defunding the police in LA.
Exactly.
Right.
Because that is something that you can actually do. Yep. You can get other, people on board for these kinds of things if you literally just try to explain them to them. Yep. I think at the base of my frustration with the Democratic Party is the fact that we abdicate the responsibility to explain ideas to people that would actually improve people's lives. And then we're like wondering where all of these voters became so horrible. And, where all of these, we lost all these people along the way. It's actually like, I think this is, the thing that I think is, if more white women vote for Donald Trump than they did last time, then what is it that we didn't give them to split with their husbands over? It was married white women. It's always married white women. These are white women who I assume are married to Trump voters.
Or if not, women don't get married. I've observed marriage from the outside for
figure
a long
yourself
time,
out.
and it seems terrible. So don't do it.
But I mean, like, if you have to think to yourself, okay, there is this group of voters who are voting very explicitly against their own interests in in racial solidarity, and with husbands who are choosing to also make this horrible choice. What is an issue that we could at least give them to break with their husbands over? What do we need to say to them to make them break with their husbands and not vote like horrible, human beings?
Well, if it's not autonomy over their bodies or not dying of COVID,
that's the thing.
Not watching the world burn up, then I don't freaking know.
It's almost definitely about childcare. It's actually these are not
maybe.
These are not women who are living in they're not women who like live in a world where they prioritize women, obviously. So fine, we know that because they're married to Trump voters, probably. Like they're married. That's if you can figure out a way to make it about someone else that is still about them. But my point is beyond all of that. Just that like if you are not going to try to explain why the issue of police violence is an issue that also affects children. It is an issue that you can explain in terms of a public health crisis that also affects communities, that it doesn't have to just be like, oh, we're just going to explain it, and if you don't care about black people because you're a white nationalist living in some weird whatever, then we're not even going to try to talk to you about it. We're going to pretend we've never heard of this issue, and we're going to be mad when AOC brings it up. Instead, we should have people in districts like that willing to at least explain it, willing to say the thing. We shouldn't be chastising people inside the Democratic Party for doing the right thing.
Right, and not just explaining it, but really, I think what so many
people advocating for it.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think what so many people in the Democratic Party don't understand is that like so many voters really just like appreciate like a strong stance because it leads voters to believe that they are like actually in it because they care about something. And it doesn't always necessarily matter what the issue is, truth be told. I mean, and I think that that's what so many, especially members of the House, but certainly some of these progressive issues like that they sort of like would think that, they don't want to get anywhere near. We're going to talk about props in a second and we'll go into more of these, but like, a $15 minimum wage far outperformed Joe Biden in Florida. It passed. The legalizing marijuana, which Joe Biden doesn't even actually stand for. He does stand for a $15 minimum wage. I don't know whether he talked about it much.
But it's like at this point, stand for a $25 an hour one.
Like, all of those ballot propositions outperformed Biden in those states. So
that's
like
a willingness to give people permission to like actively support these issues is really critical to getting them to understand them.
Yeah, and to vote for you.
I mean, this is also an evolution that everyone can witness within our own few months, because the language of defund the police was initially off-putting to a lot of people. A lot of us explained it to our parents. A lot of us explained it to people in our communities. And because of that, we also were given an opportunity to be like, hi, reasonable person that you know actually supports this. It's not crazy. It's just a thing that we should do. And also we were able to then be like, maybe you could actively be interested in this as well, and you could use this language because it now means something that you're comfortable with it meaning. Someone had to explain that because it was...
That's how every movement has worked
yes,
in history.
In history, it's all of it.
Totally.
We had to explain women's rights. We had to explain gay rights. Like, this is how it works. This is how you push things.
Right.
We know this. We have a millennia of history.
Right.
It was not so long ago that...
right behind me that will frickin' explain this. I will send them. I will personally buy them for every Democrat. Like, this isn't hard. This isn't new. Yeah. This is how it always works.
Yeah, totally.
And this is literally for decades like what they have specifically been fighting against.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the fact that this is a tolerated viewpoint in the Democratic Party, the fact that Abigail Spanberger was not just like reamed out, and to be fair, it is really embarrassing to have AOC indirectly ream you out in a newspaper article just after you do that. So like, that's why I was saying
directly ream you out, which I think she also did. But
at the top of the podcast, we finally have someone to advocate for, to push back against this idea. And I think that is saying that kind of stuff is going to be a different experience than it used to be, thankfully. But that shouldn't be a tolerated talking point.
No.
That should have been something.
A Speaker of the House who says, no, we're not going to sit here and let you on this call, especially when we know it's being live tweeted. But even without, sit here and dismiss or denigrate the movement for Black Lives. Like, you need to stop right now. Like, that is the Speaker of the House should have absolutely done that immediately, and she didn't, because she agrees.
Exactly. There's no moral leadership on any of these issues in any of the House leadership, and there is moral leadership in the House available.
Right.
So we don't have to live in a world where we don't have any moral leadership. But we do. So that's but we do. Nothing gets me fired up.
Good news in California.
Like moderates in the House.
What'd you say, Kat?
I said at least there was good news in California.
Listen, there's good and bad news in California. It's a mixed bag.
Yes, I'm trying to.
As you know,
I know. Yes, I feel very good about some of these things. Like very.
As you know, we are a props podcast.
Yes.
But first, let's talk about some of the great things that happen in California. First of all, So I think we had mentioned it on the podcast before. There was a city council race here for a seat where it got so heated that Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi endorsed in an LA city council race. Yeah, endorsed like a longtime incumbent. And there was a DSA endorsed and Project ID endorsed candidate Nithya Raman, who was running for what is one of the most hilariously gerrymandered district seats in all of the land. It's like, it's so wacky. But she won. She did it. And these are, the LA City Council, I think, is not well understood. It certainly wasn't even by me until this race kind of landed on my radar. It, because of that, really heavily favors incumbents. It's a really small city council. It only has like 15 members, so it's not like the New York City Council where it's like a tiny parliament. It's a powerful body that no one has any oversight over, apparently, and no one pays attention to. And so, a lot of the people who are on it are like very entrenched in some unsavory fundraising obligations, very entrenched with some communities that are not communities inside their district, but are in fact just rich people outside of their district. Mm-hmm. And so it was a really...
We've had a good amount of scandals on the LA City.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of scandals on LA. It was a really big deal that a candidate that was like a real grassroots candidate was able to defeat one of these incumbents.
Yeah.
Well, and she did it following the AOC model. She built a larger volunteer operation than we've ever had in any LA City Council race. She had a larger small dollar donation operation than any other city council race. Like, again, she followed the model that we know works. She stands for things.
Right.
Remarkably.
That's a key part of all of this.
Right? She's progressive. She's great on the internet. Like, she did the things that we see win, and she won. Imagine that.
Yeah.
That's, I mean,
by the way,
go ahead. No.
I was just going to say, related to that, does anybody have a worse record with their endorsements than Hillary Clinton this election cycle?
I mean,
Hillary and Nancy, they should stop endorsing. Or no, I mean, look, for me, they should keep endorsing.
right. Feel free.
Please.
Right.
It like
endorse all the
boggles
Kennedys you want.
my mind. Hillary Clinton just like wandering around looking for the most problematic Democratic incumbents to endorse,
Ooh,
and then
Elliot
being
Engel,
like,
yes, great.
right,
Please,
I got to
vote.
get in there and make sure that this longtime incumbent in the LA City Council keeps his seat. Like what?
I mean, imagine being that committed to not seeing anything change.
Right?
I know.
I mean,
And
it's
just kicking the
wild.
left in the teeth. That's also
Right.
a big part
Like,
of
you
it.
know, I don't live anywhere near Los Angeles, never have, but I really don't like this candidate whose whole platform is about ending homelessness.
Right.
I gotta get in there and endorse the other guy. Hillary, what are you doing? Retire. What
And
are
also
you
just
doing?
like under no circumstances should you be endorsing in an LA City Council race, no matter the like don't like I understand like Nithya had national endorsements because she was an insurgent candidate. And that's one thing. Do not, as Hillary Clinton, be just like poking around looking for like incredibly local races to go be endorsing, and like this has nothing to do with you.
No. And
What
then
could-
to endorse, they both endorsed a man over a woman of color
Right.
against
I mean-
all of the lip service that they give the opposite
No,
way.
Yeah.
It made no sense in any way.
It's I mean even Nancy, I'm like don't be endorsing in the LA City Council. You don't live in LA.
When's the last
If
time?
you want to endorse around in San Francisco, whatever, do you. But like, don't be coming down to Southern California and endorsing in the city council here. Like, go home.
And all it did was piss people off.
Well, exactly.
Even if you really like Hillary and Nancy, why are you endorsing in our city council? Like
Right.
everyone was
Right. Get
out of town.
confused and furious, and like all the the flurry of emails and texts that I was getting from people being like, "WTF? Like, why are they here? Why do they care about this?"
Yeah.
What could
Wild.
also they possibly have had to gain from this? Like,
Right.
it's just it was like a ticket to embarrassment and nothing else.
Right. Yeah.
See, but and then we also now our LA County Board of Supervisors is entirely female.
Which is
Holly
huge
Mitchell
because
one?
the LA County Board of Supervisors, for people who don't know. So California,
Right. It's
fifth
unusual.
largest economy in the world. LA County is actually technically the sixth largest economy in the world. We're the largest county in the country, which is part of the reason why the LA City Council is so small, because LA City and LA County are two very different things.
Right.
But the LA Board of Supervisors runs this like tens of billion, I think it's like a $36 billion budget or
it's-
something,
Yeah.
with absolutely no oversight except the voters. So the Board of Supervisors is one of the most powerful bodies, not just in the country, but in the world, and they are entirely female now. It's
Yeah.
incredible. And
amazing.
largely
Yeah.
women of color.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, it's-
unbelievable.
It's
Yeah.
I'm
It's crazy.
it's exciting, and also I think maybe just having like some visibility. I think it gives the Board of Supervisors some visibility, which is nice because it would be nice if people in LA County understood what the Board of Supervisors did.
'cause
I think
nobody
absolutely.
knows.
People really don't know.
You know?
And you're right. That is where
That's
that's
where the
power
purse strings
is.
are.
That-
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
power.
People, I don't think understand.
That's- I think-
people see that on their ballot and they're like, Board of Supervisors. Like that seems like some sort of, that's similar to like the community college board member that I had to vote on. Or
Right.
whatever. Like because people just don't know. They don't know. But
Well,
that-
and also I think
No.
LA City is the most powerful municipality in that county, and that because of that, people are used to thinking about like the city being the powerful because it's powerful in that it's the most powerful city inside of LA County. But the way that we keep it all together in LA County, because like neither Brent nor I live in the city of LA. The way that we keep it all together is that we all are being actually governed by the Board of Supervisors. The reason we're able to exist with all these ridiculous municipalities just like kind of like cropped up in little places all over the city is because the Board of Supervisors is where the actual purse strings are.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of, can we talk really quickly? It's not on here, but can we just talk about how neither of the incumbents in the West Hollywood City Council election,
Yes.
Yay.
you guys, that's
You
the
guys.
first time in
Yay.
the history of ever, as far as
It took
as long as I've
so much
been in
work.
Hollywood, which has been well over a decade, and like these guys just like keep winning and winning and winning. It's mostly men on there. One of them had to literally resign from like his mayorship because it just like changed.
It's a rotating
It's
mayorship.
a rotating because he got caught in a scandal of basically like being like a total gross, like was just sort of like sexually harassing like anyone like in his general vicinity, and like he was still running again, by the way, and I think most people thought that those two guys were just probably going to win again, and neither of them did.
Glorious.
It's
glorious.
Just, and also, I mean, that was a really
also on the West Hollywood City Council.
Sebi Shine.
Yep.
That was also that's a really hard race to research, and so the fact that residents of West Hollywood actually were like, we should go and figure out who to vote for in this race.
We should figure out how to not have these two guys go back.
It was a big deal because almost nobody.
Yeah, it felt like a very collective. Like I knew that was the thing that people were asking me about more than almost the props. Just I mean, I have a lot of friends in West Hollywood, but they were like, "Who are you voting for? Let's all vote for the same people."
Well, and hey, Gascon beat Jackie Lacey.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Same thing. Like
same thing.
So for you guys, the district attorney Jackie Lacey. Here's how terrible she is. Gascon came out after he won, and the first thing he said is, "Hey, we're gonna stop trying youth as adults. How about that?" Right? Like,
right.
First
just
day.
a wild.
So, like, you know, and it was the same thing. Like, people don't know much about Gascon. They just know he's not Jackie Lacey.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, there was a three-way race in the primary, and everyone was just like, vote for anyone who's not Jackie Lacey, and then we're just going to agree to vote for whoever is the other person.
Makes it. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
Because I think he also said he's not going to try people for the death penalty. Also.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right,
Another thing that maybe is just a good idea that anyone could have had.
Well, we tried to pass that prop a while ago.
First 5 seconds of being elected, and he's like, "We're just not going to do these two things." It's like, "Oh yeah, that's how bad Jackie Lacey was."
Right. It was that easy.
That's
right. Yeah.
Like he could be done now, and we'd be so much better off.
He's done it
than we were 3 days ago.
Yeah.
And then we passed Measure J, which I think we mentioned before, but
so good.
We passed a measure that basically means that 10% of our budget has to go to like programs that help people, as opposed to just like paying to further, I guess, like murder citizenry and buy tanks for the police.
I mean, it's a roundabout defund the police sort of.
It's a roundabout defund the police, and it was, I think, an attempt to show that cities can just like decide to do something about this problem. Like, we're not all just like helpless to live in a world where highly militarized police are harassing us at every turn. I wish that New York City would take a clue, because I feel like I've been seeing nothing but footage of like phalanxes of police coming and attacking random people hanging out in parks and stuff like that recently.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of like, because part of the lack of advocacy on this issue at the national level and from a lot of the Democratic Party has created this sense that we have like no way to like move forward with this idea. And this is, by the way, the idea of like putting money into like programs that help people is not controversial, you guys. It only sounds controversial in the telling, you know, where it's like police officers promise you'll be murdered in your home if you take their tanks away. And it's like, we used to not have that and also not have tanks. So that's not actually a truthful telling of what's going on. But it's felt a little bit like cities have had to really take the lead in terms of figuring out like, okay, how do we put this into practice? And so there's been a lot of kind of like experimentation going on. Because I think there was a city in the Midwest that also did something in the primaries that was kind of meaningful. Maybe in St. Louis or something, I can't remember. But in any case, I think it's important that we be on record as trying something.
Right.
You know, like just to look like we are on the way.
Yeah.
Because it's almost felt like everyone's been like, well, it's nice to defund the police and all, but like, let's not defund the police. It's like, well, let's do it.
Yeah, totally.
Like,
We can't do it.
Now for all of you listeners who maybe don't live in California and have this vision of California as some sort of like socialist utopia.
If only.
You know, that socialist utopia let giant corporations write their own labor laws. It let them continue to pay the same tax rate that they've been paying since the 1970s.
Which is
It
artificially.
allowed us to continue not having affirmative action, which we ourselves voted on getting rid of back in the 90s.
The first state in the nation to do it.
So
So awkward.
maybe just restructure that picture that you have of of California.
Well, I think
you don't always get it right.
Don't restructure it, but do think critically to yourself about whether the proposition system is a democratic process. Because I don't think this is what the will of the voters of California actually is.
I don't think it is either.
I think the will of the voters of California is progressive policy that that is proposed by the politicians we vote for.
Yeah.
I think the problem with the props is, more than $200 million got spent letting Uber write their own laws. how are regular people supposed to compete with that?
Yeah,
When we
and
talk
and
about
it's hard to figure out. I think ultimately I figured out what a winning. It's hard to figure out what a winning argument is when there's so many sort of like different like
Well,
and
and
half
when
of those
there's
advertisements are
against that kind of
misinformation
advertising.
campaigns. Like Uber would have you believe that they're like giving all of their drivers like entirely free healthcare plans.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, okay, well, you're not doing that. But like, the at least to me, the argument that sort of like ended up being the winning argument was like, do you really want giant corporations writing their own labor laws?
Right.
And people would, and then when you said it like that to people, they would immediately become horrified. Because I heard a lot of progressives sort of like, oh, well, I don't really like that AB5 or whatever, the bill, which is like, look, we can discuss whether that's garbage or not. It might be, I don't know. But like the idea that the fix to it would be to like
right, to let Uber write their own labor laws.
To write labor laws is insane. So like, but you're right, like that argument was never placed in front of enough people because there wasn't enough money behind it, and there wasn't. It just, you're absolutely right. Like this just doesn't reflect California, which is what's so deeply upsetting about this whole situation.
Yeah. The one thing we did right was we did restore the voting rights to people on parole.
Yes.
So at least
and 19.
And Prop 19, which everyone got that one, and I mean we were in favor of Prop 19.
A lot of progressives were no on.
A lot of progressives said no on it, even though it was the only opposition group was the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, which, as we know, is like a fake group of people that just are like obsessed with lowering taxes. But I mean, of the props that had clear right answers, we fucked up all of them except Prop 17, except restoring voting rights, and then voted resoundingly to continue our stem cell research funding. Who even cares? Like, the priorities of the people of the state are mind-boggling to me. We're like, let's not get rid of cash bail, but we do want to make sure that our state stem cell research thing is like.
Well, and they also said let's restore the right to vote, but not let 17-year-olds who will be 18 in general vote in the primary.
Isn't that wild?
What on earth?
I don't, and that got like blown out. Like how?
Right? How? Everyone was just like that concerned about 17-year-olds voting in the primary.
Do that.
I don't understand how you could vote yes on one and no on the other.
Wild.
It makes no sense.
Having called a bunch of voters and spoken to them about the props, I can tell you exactly how you would do that, and it's by not understanding at all what any of the props mean.
Right.
That's
right.
And
that's the big problem.
It was like I would start the conversation and someone would be like, "Well, I'm supposed to vote no on 21, right?" And I would be like, "Well, let me tell you what I think you've probably heard about it, and then also why that's garbage." And then you had to go through every prop and be like, let me tell you what I think, the affirmative action one, let me tell you what I think you've probably heard. You probably have heard that it's some kind of like grave injustice to, and like that, somehow affirmative action is like the opposite of affirmative action. Like the arguments against that prop were like actually arguing against the thing that like, it was a real mindfuck. But you would have to start with, here's what you've probably heard. And then, or you've heard nothing because this means nothing. And here's what is actually happening. And it was never the same thing. Yeah. You should not have props on the ballot where you can say, here's what you've heard and here's what it means, and have them be diametrically opposed things.
Yeah.
Well, we are a state that for the second time in a row has voted against expanding rent control, even though we have the biggest homelessness crisis in the country and no one can afford to live here. That is because nobody actually understands the props, and because the people with money are lying all over the place, everywhere, constantly, because they can afford to, and the people who are for these props or against them, depending on what they are, they don't have the money to accurately organize.
Rent control is the perfect example, too, because that prop doesn't even do anything. It just says your own community can make their own laws.
Decide.
It doesn't impose rent control on the state. The number of people I had to explain that to, where I was like, it's not going to raise or lower your property values because it doesn't legislate anything.
Yeah.
Like, you can't draw a straight line to having the right to make a law and then your property values going down. Like, you would then vote for people in your community to make this law.
Well, and it also just like all of these just take such critical thinking, which it would be nice if everyone did, I guess, but like it's also sort of like a lot to expect, and like there's
too much to expect.
There's layers to it too, like even just going back to the Uber one, like one of the advertisements for yes on 22 that I think probably landed with a lot of people was the one that Mothers Against Drunk Driving did in favor of that, and like one Google search that took me 30 seconds made me realize that Mothers Against Drug Driving is getting a boatload of money from Uber and Lyft and all of those ride shares, and that makes sense. Like that partnership makes sense, but like it also financially, like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, like to some degree has to do that, and like people don't put these things together
Well, no, I mean,
when they're trying to dive down these rabbit holes to try and figure out what the hell these props are.
Who has time? Think how long it took us to research for our prop
weeks
guide.
to write that prop guide.
I mean, it took.
Well, no, I'm sorry. People have time to research and find guides. I just spent 6 months exhaustively doing a ridiculous amount of work educating people and saying this is where you can go to find the information for this. There was nothing but guides. They didn't have to research these. They just had to find good guides, of which there were a trillion, and they could have done some quick Googles. And so I'm not willing to give, voting is really hard. These are wildly confusing.
Yeah.
I am so freaking tired about voting about dialysis. I don't know anything about dialysis. I shouldn't be voting about dialysis.
I should never have to have learned.
Barely spell. In fact, I can't because the Y. Where does the Y go? I don't understand. But this is important. If you look at these issues, they matter, and it's worth Googling to find a guide. There are people who've done the work.
Yeah.
I feel like one thing I realized because we do this guide, a lot of people contact me for local guides where they live, and then I have to go and vet all of these local guides for like Santa Monica or whatever. It's even because of the number of guides that only cover a portion of the ballot in California, it's even hard work to find all of the guides that you need. It shouldn't require this many layers,
It shouldn't, and it's not easy. But I just can't give most people a pass. Most people
what I can do,
Los Angeles County can sit down and look this up and figure it out. And I'm sorry, but figuring out whether or not we should eliminate cash bail is freaking worth you sitting down and spending 20 minutes Googling.
Well, a lot of progressives did not figure out the same thing that we did about that, as it turned out. And if you have questions as a listener, we did a whole props guide
episode.
We did a whole episode of the podcast as well where we explain the Prop 25 situation.
Yeah.
Okay, let's briefly props around the country.
Yeah.
Massachusetts.
You don't have my favorite one on the list, so I'm going to say it after.
Good.
Oh, yeah, say it after.
Yeah, surprise us.
Massachusetts voted down ranked choice voting. That's on you guys. I don't know what to say to that except that you did it wrong.
Come on, Mass, get it right.
I will say that Florida correctly voted down jungle primaries because we have them and they're stupid.
And they correctly voted against this year's Amendment 4, which was an attempt to prevent people from passing last year's Amendment 4. It was trying to require that basically anytime the people wanted to amend the state constitution, they actually had to vote twice. And go through the whole process twice.
Right.
Vote twice. Get
oh my God, I can't believe I forgot to put that on the
petition
doc.
signed twice. You have to do it twice because they're so mad that they tried to reenfranchise felons and Floridians were like,
a vast majority of them voted for that, by the way. It's
exactly. So they understood, and the irony of it being Amendment 4, again, it's the same amendment. So Floridians were like, oh no, I see what you're doing here, and they chucked them the bird.
Was it also, though, Florida where it was either Florida or maybe Colorado, where they were voting on making sure that only citizens could vote?
Well, yeah, and Floridians passed that at like a 96% rate.
Well,
Florida.
because it's like...
Did anyone tell them that that's
already the law?
No, it literally was just reaffirming that only citizens can vote. Like, we just want to make sure that we're all sure that we want to follow the law and make sure
that's
only
amazing.
Citizens
I would have voted no on that just
to be a contrarian.
Well, there are some jurisdictions that are allowing undocumented citizens to vote on local issues like school board, city council.
Oh, yeah. Well, as they
makes a lot
should.
of sense because, first of all, they're freaking paying for it.
Right. They're paying the
And
taxes.
their kids are going to school, etc. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
but, it's a very rare thing that I hope expands. But Florida was like, we just want to make sure. And everybody in the state agreed. Oh, 100%
the
of the
whole
state
state was like, only citizens.
Absolutely. Let's just reaffirm. We're not deciding this. We're
Right.
all just going to reaffirm that we agree that only citizens can vote.
Yeah.
It's like reaffirming that, like, the ocean is blue. Like,
It's
like...
exactly what it was.
In any case, a lot of states legalize marijuana, as is often people's want in an election year. Arizona, Montana, New Jersey, South Dakota, all places where marijuana will be legal. We've noted it about 16 times, but Florida also raised the minimum wage while voting for Donald Trump. People went to the polls. cast a ballot for Donald Trump himself. And then we're also like, we should have a $15 an hour minimum wage, which I think shows you, back in 2016, Brent and I really we wrote a whole list of reasons we were mad at Hillary Clinton. A list of ways she could have reached out to progressives.
Yes.
And one of the ones that we said was that she was in favor at the time of a $12 an hour minimum wage. And we were like, why not do 15? Why not do 1,000? Right. If it's not going to pass, it's not going to pass.
She was doing that whole thing where she was like, 15 is just too high, but 12 we could get past. As if they're going to pass it. It's been $7.95 since like the beginning of time.
Nope. So, right. Like, is this somehow it was only possible. 12 is reasonable.
Stance on that was just literally the dumbest thing. And it was too stupid.
But this shows you that you can literally get people to go to the polls for Donald Trump and vote for a $15 an hour minimum wage. Just run on it.
And then while they're there, they'll reaffirm that only citizens
right.
can vote.
I mean, they'll jump through. Well, this is why I've always said that I don't think that Trump voters are who we think they are. I don't know who they are exactly, but I feel like Reagan Republicanism is not it.
No.
It's something else. It's a confusing thing. These are people that are wanting only citizens to vote, and they're voting for Donald Trump, and then they also want to raise the minimum wage, and they also really meant that they wanted to restore voting rights for felons. They all of these things are existing somehow inside Florida.
Yep.
It's a crazy state.
That could be a big part of it.
That could be a big part of
Florida.
it.
It's just Florida.
Right. It's Florida. As my final note, I have a plan to do a prop now.
Oh yeah.
Oh wait, I gotta throw in my favorite one.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
All drugs are legal in Oregon now.
Yes.
That's
well done,
right,
Oregon.
Yes.
Oregon.
I'm moving to Bend, Oregon. I'm opening an opium den. It's going to be called the Bend Opium Den. Sherlock Holmes cosplay not required, but strongly encouraged.
Encouraged. Yeah.
Come on, you guys. All drugs are legal in Oregon. Way to go, Oregon.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oregon was like, these are trying times.
Guess what's going to happen?
We're all stuck at home.
Drug use isn't going to go up, and
No.
incarceration is going to go down.
Yes.
You got it.
That's exactly what's going to happen.
I
The
would
exact thing that's going to happen.
bet everything on it.
Yeah.
And somehow the state's going to make like $1 zillion in tax money that
Right. Look at Colorado.
yeah,
This is the lesson we've learned.
legalize stuff and then charge money for it. And then
Taxes that we pay for any pot-related item in this state is
Yeah.
wild. I'm happy to do it because I'm both giving money to the state and getting CBD oil to help me sleep. So it works out well for everybody. But like the taxes are insane. The state is making trillions of dollars. Tax opium. Tax
know.
mushrooms.
Guys,
Tax LSD.
I was just in Oregon. It was a wild place.
they were having
Oregon
indoor
is
dining, weren't
a
they?
Special place.
They were at the indoor dining. I was in
no.
Southern Oregon, which is the part of Oregon that it's like definitely big time Trump country, but also like signs everywhere to join, what is it, Jeffersonville or Jefferson or whatever.
The state
Like,
of Jefferson?
they're trying, it's the part of Oregon that's trying to become Idaho or wherever they're trying to become, basically. So I have no idea what's going on up there. I am with you in very much approving of this prop, but like,
What has
Florida
happened?
is weird,
Well,
then-
only a state
then,
like
then
that.
so is Oregon. That's all.
Only a state like that could legalize all drugs. So I mean,
Right.
it goes hand
Right.
in hand.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, they're taking their responsibility as a frontier, as a Western,
true. Right.
state really seriously.
Yeah.
They don't fool around in Oregon.
Yeah.
They do not. Well, they do a lot, but now they can
That's
do
right.
it legally.
They're going to do it legally.
Yeah.
In any case, I want to pass a prop that puts campaign financing limits on the props in California.
Yes.
Oh, I like
That's, I think, what we need to do. I've been trying to think. At first, I wanted an abstain thing. I mean, I've had a lot of ideas about props we could have on the ballot next time, because once you're doing it, I mean, if we're going to have to vote on 18,000 props, why not vote on 18,002 props? Let's go for it. But I think now it's campaign finance limits on the props. There is no reason that Uber should have been allowed to spend the kind of money they spent to write their own labor laws.
And I think people would vote for that. I think a prop that we did pass at one point a while ago was actually having to know where the money is coming from.
Right.
On those props. I think that was something that we actually did vote on. It's been a while now, but I think that people would vote yes on that prop.
Well, who knows what
Or
happens
no,
with the
depending on
props.
how it's worded. That's the other thing about the props. It's like
I believe-
you have to figure out.
It's all about
you only
the
have two
campaign.
choices, and it's sometimes hard to figure out which is the
Well,
right one.
I've told Lila I think she should call it the ice cream and chocolate cake prop.
Yeah.
Because it can have any name, and nobody's going to read it. And then
Well-
they're like, oh, I like ice cream and chocolate cake.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I like it,
I mean, Bren and I have often recommended calling various funding bills for social programs like the free unicorns and rainbows bill or something.
Right.
Like, if you want Medicare for all, don't call it that. Call it the free unicorn bill.
Yeah.
Everyone wants a unicorn. That's common sense. In any case, let's talk about the cabinet, the Biden cabinet, before we go.
Gosh.
Because obviously, if there's one thing we knew would be immediately stressing us out about the Biden administration, it's that a lot of their ideas about who should be in his cabinet are wrong.
So I think what America's going to have a moment that my mother had, because yesterday she was so, I mean, obviously we're all elated and excited, and she made like a special election carrot cake, and she was very happy. And then she saw an article come up on Apple News or something, and it was, here are Biden's potential cabinet picks, and she texted me, it was like, what is he doing? And I was like, Mom, have you met Joe Biden? Like, this is what we do. But she went from being elated to immediately being like, why is he putting these people on his cabinet? And I was like, oh, America's going to have a real awakening.
A real reckoning.
Because they're going to realize that he's going to make choices that we don't want him to make.
Yeah.
By the way, we should note that your mom was very kindly a person who proofread our prop guide for us this year.
Yes, she was.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
She's a huge fan of that. She sent it to everybody, and she talks about it constantly. She's a big Lila fan. Brent, she'll be a big fan of yours after she listens to this episode, which she will, because I'm on it.
I win.
Yes, but Lila wins.
But yeah, so that's she did us a very nice favor by doing that, because we are both terrible proofreaders.
Yeah, both writers.
In any case,
but
both writers who cannot proofread our writing.
Yeah.
We stick with the first draft kind.
It's going to be interesting because like there's so many different people who feel like they should get to weigh in on this, and they shouldn't, by the way, because Wall Street should not get to tell Joe Biden who they want on his cabinet, and
but Wall Street paid
Silicon
for
Valley
the campaign.
shouldn't. Certainly Republicans shouldn't, but like they're going to, because like
John
people
Kasich
from
has
the
ideas.
Lincoln Project are going to be like, we won you the election, which they didn't. So it's going to be, and look, his instincts are going to be wrong on this. So like you're going to have to. The battle is not necessarily going to be against Wall Street. It's going to be with Joe Biden's own brain.
Right.
Well, look, first of all, Biden's instincts are always wrong. And second, I really do like Kamala for a lot of reasons, but one thing that she's not great at, and that she's shown in her presidential campaign and in her Senate campaign, is she is not great at staffing.
Yeah.
Well, there were a million different think pieces about how her campaign went wrong, and it was all due to how
it's all that, and like my friends who've worked on, like, it's not her strength. And so of all of the things that I would really love for Kamala to weigh in on, I do not trust her to be able to bring Biden's thinking around to who's going to be on the cabinet, because she's not going to push him correctly, because this is also a place where she's very weak.
Yeah, and I think this is also a place where he is going to immediately sink back into a kind of Democratic establishment thinking that is really not appropriate for this moment. Right. Because he is lucky that we are so far into crisis that we're past the Iraq War, because he is not someone who has a glowing record on voting for us. Well, he has a glowing record in terms of voting for us to go to war, but he is not someone whose national defense strategy in the past has necessarily been something to marvel at. And his instincts in terms of who he wants for both state and for defense are going to be just wrong, because he's going to want warmongers. You know, he was talking about having Susan Rice as his running mate. He's going to want her for the State Department. And I feel like this is like an ongoing issue that like we can never like rid ourselves of Susan Rice. And Susan Rice, look, is she a person who sometimes says things on TV that even I agree with, that that makes a lot of sense, that is like a strong woman? All of these are true. She is a warmonger, though. Do not have a warmonger be involved in your diplomacy efforts. Have somebody who's a peacemonger. Have like one thing that Americans are not interested in having right now is a stupid war. And all of the people that he would like to put in our diplomacy-related positions and our defense-related positions are people who maybe would like to have a war for no particular reason, just because that makes them feel fancy. You know, like, I think, like, Chris Coons. I know that Chris Coons was a big surrogate for Biden. I know that he's been a big supporter of Biden's. They're, compatriots in being from the tax haven of Delaware. But I don't feel like Chris Coons is necessarily who you want leading your diplomatic efforts
Well,
either.
and especially right now. I mean, I think the thing that makes state really important right now is that the world hates us, and rightfully so.
Yes.
And we have to get back into their good graces. We have to rebuild partnerships. We have to show them, because this was also, like, don't think the world didn't notice that it took us 5 days after Election Day to decide that we wanted Biden over Trump and that half the country still wanted Trump. Like, they know.
Right.
Like, they're still looking at us side eye, and they should be. So we need somebody who is, you know, who has personality. With Susan Rice, she's incredibly smart, but she's not an exciting or interesting person. Someone who people are going to like. Like, if I were choosing, I would put Ayanna Pressley in charge of state so fast.
I know.
Like, and she could make the world love us.
She's a winning personality.
You need a real sort of like, you need a real coalition builder who's like someone that people are going to like want to be with.
And you know, you need someone who is a great speaker. You need someone who looks like the world. You know, you need, and it's Susan Rice and then a bunch of dudes. And like none of these people are the people for this moment when we have to try to get back. We're never going to be the leaders of the free world again.
Thank God.
Right? Fine. And whatever. Let Germany have it. But
let's not let them have. Let's be careful.
Is doing a great job. We will keep an
Let's
eye
be
on
careful
them.
with Germany.
Keep an eye.
Getting back into NATO, but we can't be China, right? But like, it needs to be someone great, and it needs to be an Ayanna. You know, even look, I'm not Elizabeth Warren's biggest fan, but she is someone who people love, who she can get on board. She's got personality. You need someone who's going to make America love, or the world love America again, and none of these people will do it.
Yeah, I agree.
And also, none of these people reflect the politics of diplomacy that I think Americans are going to want going forward, which are really different than how we have been operating in the past. I don't think we can go back to the sort of Bush era consensus about how diplomacy works. And just because I just said Obama was...
Who are you, Sarah Palin?
Just because Obama was like a sparkling personality that everyone loved doesn't mean that, like, we need to have a more sustainable strategy than just hoping that the president is a sparkling personality.
Well, and
that
we also now have a president who is not, and who is prone to saying things like, you ain't black if you don't vote for me. So we need a State Department personality, because, you know, you could, like, I think Hillary did a great job in state. You know, John Kerry.
She knew everyone already.
Right. Yeah. John Kerry was great, and he doesn't have any personality, but you don't need that charisma and charm when you have an Obama. But now we have a Biden, and so we need that charisma and charm.
I agree. Yep.
Yeah, someone to be the public speaker so that Biden never has to be in front of the microphone.
Ayanna frickin' Presley.
Well, Ayanna Pressley for everything, by the way.
First of all, the fact that she isn't president is shocking.
Ridiculous.
And insulting at every level. But also, like, come on, put her in front of the world. And then for her career, this is great, because you can come out of state and run for president. We've seen it, right? So it's great for her. Like, all of these people are...
They're so hell-bent on not noticing how important it is for them to fully embrace Ayanna Pressley that they like want to lose.
I think AOC scares them.
I mean...
Ayanna Pressley scares the crap out of them.
She should.
She absolutely should.
She's the one who can be the bridge. Like, AOC really speaks to the activist base. Ayanna Pressley is a transformative speaker no matter who you are, if you're just like a breathing human being.
Yeah.
That's Brent and I saw her on the trail in Iowa, and we were shocked.
Times. She was easily the best surrogate that anyone had. It's amazing that Elizabeth Warren didn't win that primary based solely on like having Ayanna Pressley go around on her behalf.
Well,
because
Elizabeth Warren couldn't come in first, second, or third in either of her home states. So don't blame Ayanna for
No, I'm not blaming Ayanna.
No one would.
Like,
you couldn't possibly.
Elizabeth Warren's own failings that like couldn't overcome how great Ayanna Pressley was.
Right.
I mean, that's quite a failing to not overcome. To not have to overcome Ayanna Pressley's.
But speaking of Elizabeth
clear
Warren,
winningness. Yes.
She wants a job that I would like to give her, but I don't think she's going to get. And this is one. Yeah. There's three cabinet secretaries that the left really sort of has their eye on. It's Treasury, it's EPA, and it's Labor. And obviously they would like a progressive at heading every single one of these agencies. I think they, on some level, realize they aren't going to get it, so I think they're probably smartly picking their fights, and this is one that they are willing to have here. And I don't think they necessarily care whether it is Elizabeth Warren or not, although it seems like she also wants it.
But would be great. I mean, this is...
Treasury would be the place.
Does well.
Right.
She's literally an expert.
given where we are economically in this country now, given where we're going to be in the next couple of years, and given where poor people are, like, I would want Warren in Treasury.
Same.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somebody from the left who sort of like gets that the Treasury can just be writing checks. Give it to Stephanie Kelton.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Give it to Stephanie Kelton and don't look back.
Somebody who understands, what Lila and I have understood for years, which is that the economy and money is fake.
All of it's fake. The economy is not real.
Lila's favorite line.
Yeah. Stolen from
that's
my
who the left wants running
economist
Treasury,
grandfather.
and I'm here for it.
Yeah, it should be Warren. It won't be Warren, but it should be Warren.
No.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and
everybody
there's-
else that's listed for Treasury are people whose names you wouldn't recognize, but who have
Well,
tied.
Melody Hobson is married to George Lucas, which first of all tells you everything you need to know about George Lucas. He's a wonderful, brilliant, incredible man because he married Melody Hobson. But also, Melody Hobson for anything. She lives at Skywalker Ranch. She married George Lucas. She's also a brilliant woman. But I mean, these two. Sometimes when someone chooses the right partner, like how none of us were for Obama until we met Michelle. We were like, oh yeah, I'll vote for this dude. Melody and George both chose partners who were so great that you have to love both of them.
Well, there, a ringing endorsement.
If
Right,
it
there
can't
we
be
go.
Warren, make it Melody. And her name is Melody. It's a beautiful. I'm pro that, but it should be Warren. The thing is, my problem is that they're gonna choose Brainerd
Yeah.
just because she's inoffensive. And talk about the thing we don't need right now.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Pick someone offensive.
No, it's gonna be Brainerd.
Yeah.
Go wild.
Speaking of inoffensive, can we move on to the frickin' Justice Department?
Doug Jones.
Doug Jones, the most inoffensive
Fully.
person ever.
He's like the Bruce Braley of.
Well, and
I wish that other people knew Bruce Braley so that I could
'cause
make that reference
I
more.
haven't Googled that person yet. I have no idea who you're talking about. I
Oh,
assume
he
you're
read
Oh.
Joni Ernst.
He's a long-standing character in this podcast's history.
Yeah.
He is the Teresa Greenfield of Joni Ernst's first campaign.
Oh, I do remember you talking about this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We all agree it should be Sally Yates, right?
Yeah, sure.
Think
I
that
mean, come on, it can't be Doug
sounds
or
right.
Tom. I think Sally's clearly the right person.
I don't want it to be Tom Perez because I'm mad at him.
Well, he's terrible in everything.
Always.
So I feel like I don't even care if he would be good at the job. I'm too mad at him to consider whether he's good at the job or not.
Right. I mean, I don't want him heading the Justice Department. Look, he's actually I left his name off of some of this. Like, I was pulling this from Politico article. His name is listed as potential for, like, literally any of these.
Right.
Like,
Well, he's going to need a
there's
job
one-
because
and,
they're
like,
going to
look,
kick him out of his chairmanship.
Well, and that is what I was about to say, is that, like, if he has to end up in the cabinet, then, like, fine. But, like, then let's really, like, train our focus on the DNC race and, like, really get somebody better than him in there.
Oh,
Right,
I'm
let-
so excited for the DNC race. I'm going to be all over that, like, why not?
Yeah, it's
Rise?
gonna
I
be good.
cannot
Yeah.
Wait.
Yeah. Yeah.
That and a benefit of getting all of these, like, giving cabinet appointments to, like, all of these sort of, like, moderate people that might be in the midst for this is that we could have a really exciting DNC race.
Yeah, but then we'd have
totally.
a shitty cabinet.
Yeah, but we're gonna have a shitty cap. That's already
Okay,
a
but
thing.
Whatever. I'm making a Sally Yates for
Yeah, I like it.
Justice
Why not?
Department T-shirt.
Let's
not?
do it.
This is the new. It should
Oh
be,
yeah, a T-shirt. Oh yeah, I'd wear that T-shirt.
T-shirts win elections.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
I feel like one ongoing frustration I have is there for HHS secretary, they're talking about either Michelle Lujan Grisham or Vivek Murthy. And, like, look, both inoffensive choices. Vivek Murthy, aside from being on the COVID task force, has been just selling a book about happiness for the last
The
year.
upcoming
or
be
loneliness,
announced
sorry.
COVID task force.
Right, yes, the upcoming COVID task force. But he wrote a book about loneliness, and he's just been, like, hawking that for the last year, so I don't know what is going on with him. I want to see someone running HHS that cares about expanding healthcare delivery more meaningfully than just operating. I want someone who's not just going to talk about operating the healthcare system as it exists, because our healthcare system is bullshit.
Yeah.
I want someone who is committed to a kind of expansive vision for the role of the HHS secretary that requires them to consider how they can use their powers in that office to actually meaningfully expand healthcare access in a way that doesn't require some sort of cockamamie Obamacare light nonsensy policy that's going to be in the courts bouncing around for 1,000 years. Like, that's an office where you can use your ability to actually like move resources around to actually improve healthcare access and not
Do you have a person in mind?
No, I've been trying to think about it. I just came up with this idea that it shouldn't be either of them from looking at their names just this moment. So I hadn't thought it through beyond that, but there's got to be someone.
What about what's his name? From Michigan.
Oh, Abdullah Saeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be someone who I think would be someone committed to the idea that healthcare access and the tools of the government could be used differently than they're used now. Somebody like Abdullah Saeed would be great. Good. Great. Abdullah Saeed did it.
All right,
done.
There we go. All right,
and he was on a task force, so he cooperated with the Bidens.
Yeah, he was on the Biden task
He
force.
sold out, so he deserves this.
I put transport. This, by the way, this list is not exhaustive in terms of all cabinet positions. I put the ones on there that like felt like they were like moderately interesting. And transportation, I don't know if it's interesting or not, but the only reason I put it on there is because supposedly the front runner is Eric Garcetti.
Which, look, first of all, transportation, I can't imagine what they do. But let's get rid of Eric Garcetti.
Yeah, move him on out.
Now.
Right.
Fine.
He's the only person I want on this list. I want him to be chosen. I want him the F out of LA. Can he start tomorrow? Like,
Yeah, I know, right? Because he's already can't run again in 2022 because of term limits. But if we could rid ourselves of him like 2 years early, then that would be lovely.
Yeah.
I'm done. And then, wait, what? Would we have we must have an election then. It wouldn't be just like deputy mayor takes over, right?
I don't know.
I don't think so. Yeah, I
We'll
think
have
it for
to
that
dive into
long.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Bye. That
Yeah,
one.
done.
Whatever
Sold.
Biden wants to do. Take Garcetti. Sold.
Right. And then
I refuse to
commerce.
discuss this.
People think this. Oh, sorry. What'd you say?
I said I refuse to even discuss this.
This is the worst two people
Actually, this
to be
is where
up
I'm
for
taking
anything.
A bathroom break.
Commerce
I love it.
listen, we're talking about.
You know, we've been talking for 2 hours, so like sometimes you have to pee.
I know. This is the longest podcast we've ever done. By far.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's been a big week.
I know. When I left my house, because I'm mysteriously recording, you may recognize me as being at Lila's house right now.
He's sitting in my seat.
But I left my house, and my boyfriend was there, and he was like, "How long do you think you're going to be?" And I was like, "If I'm gone for 3 hours, then send help." And in about 8 minutes, it will have been.
We'll be gone 3 hours.
So if I hear sirens outside, it might be because they're looking for me.
It's
But
just,
you know, what are you going to do?
you got to do what you got to do.
For a 2-hour podcast.
Right. Listen, we haven't even started discussing commerce because instead we're talking about
how long
this
this
is the longest,
podcast is.
it's the longest podcast we've ever done.
Well, I've had to use the bathroom for a while, and then I was like, well, this is a conversation I like will not engage in because it's so wildly. I mean,
Well, let's all actively not engage in it, other than saying who the names are. It's Meg
Right.
and Terry McAuliffe,
And those are both no's.
yourself, dear listener, can think to yourself about how terrible both of those two people are. And
Yeah, you don't need us to tell you.
do we have thoughts on who would be great for this?
Oh,
Commerce?
interesting.
No.
Commerce. No, we don't have any thoughts. Apparently. I'm going to think about it, though, because I know there's someone better than Meg Whitman and Terry McAuliffe out there.
My
Yeah.
dog is better
Right.
than Meg Whitman. My dog has not taken 6 months to absolutely blow $2 billion down the toilet.
Right.
Can
And the
you
world's
believe
wildest
that?
I mean, the idea that she would be up for any kind of role in any company or government or...
She was voted most ineffective CEO when she ran HP into the
HP,
ground. Like,
yeah.
what are you doing?
She's really made a career failing upwards
Right.
in a way that's...
Which, look, for a woman, that's an incredible gig.
Right. Very few women get the opportunity to fail upwards at that level.
And Terry McAuliffe has been rated by the world's most ineffective living human being by me.
Right. No, exactly. That's...
So,
And I would say at least in the top 50 of most offensive Democrats, at least. Like,
there are actually really great, effective CEOs who, like, there are other options. Meg Whitman is not the only CEO.
No,
but she is available.
Right, she's available.
That's true.
Right.
She is free.
Yeah.
So,
Unbelievable. If he
Oh,
chooses
God.
her, I swear to God, I'm getting my vote back. Voting for Kanye.
Speaking of other terrible people, Heidi Heitkamp might run agriculture.
Like, don't invite her to do anything. Let
Also,
her free.
Give it to
Marcia Fudge.
Fudge. Yeah, Fudge.
Yeah.
First of all,
Come on.
Marcia Fudge has had to live with the name Marcia Fudge for like 75 years.
And she's
a delight.
earned a cabinet position.
Yes.
She does.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it can't be high camp. That's insane.
No.
It's insanity.
No.
Yeah, and she deals with agriculture in the house, and also she's a nonsense person, which is not the truth. That's not the case with Heidi Heitkamp.
Yeah.
So it's like just like a clear win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The labor secretary, as we said, is another one that progressives have their eye on.
And it seems like actually every single person on this list, not all of the names were ones that I recognized, but like supposedly this is one where people feel like if Biden is going to like give the left something, it will be labor, especially considering what he like claims his platform is in terms of, like rebuilding the middle class and whatever else.
He has a lot of labor support. It's all like problematic labor, but I mean, one of his deals is that he's got all these unions always endorsing him.
Right. Yeah.
And look, I love that Bernie wants it, but Sarah Nelson is great.
Yes.
When I saw her name on that
Right?
list, my brain almost exploded.
That's the answer.
That is the answer.
Yeah.
That's
Totally
the
is.
answer.
Yeah.
She's amazing. I love her.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she is also, I think, Sanders is somebody who really effectively can sort of lead a movement politics is something he's really effective at. Someone like Sarah Nelson, though, is younger and has a future and that is who you want to be giving this kind of an opportunity to in a transitional moment like this, is you want to build capacity. And Sanders is not building capacity because he started the capacity discussion about the left in the first place. And we all thank him for that. But someone like Sarah Nelson is somebody that you're building capacity with. And that's what you should do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think she would be great because of, all the reasons that we love her. But I also think that she would be great because she also very much seems like the type of person who would I think that she would play well with a team, even though that she sort of, I think, would, take the stance that she has been taking. But I think that she just seems like the type of person that you would want to have, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
And she would be so interesting, people would actually pay attention to the Commerce Department.
Right. Labor.
Whatever, labor.
Whatever.
One of the ones
I was like, wait,
no one pays attention to.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, no one ever talks about the Labor Department.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's, I think that would be brilliant.
Right.
Education, I have one thing to say.
I knew you would.
Do not pick Randy Weingarten to be the Secretary of
I
Education.
saw that name on the list and I was like, well,
not
we're
do that.
talking about this one because I know how this is going to go.
Listen, there are upwards of 300 million people in America.
Right. Many of them public school teachers.
Many of them are public school teachers.
Because
if you're looking for one, they're everywhere. A lot of them might be brilliant secretaries of education for education. You don't need to pick Randy Weingarten. You just don't have to. You never have to. You don't have to do it now. You don't have to do it then. You don't have to do it tomorrow. You never have to do that. If there is one person who offers almost nothing to this discussion that is exciting or meaningful, it's Randy Weingarten.
Yeah.
So just say no.
Yep.
The VA is Buttigieg is the real discussion. And
No.
look,
No, absolutely not.
no, don't ever choose him for
I will
anything.
chain myself to the doors of the
Listen, he's going to get something. So just gird your
Here's
loins.
the only thing.
First of all,
why? Julian Castro
the
is
mayor
on
of
this
South
fucking
Bend-
list. Are you
The
kidding
mayor of South
me?
Bend, Indiana does not make you qualified to be the labor
No.
fucking secretary.
The only reason
VA.
The
Oh, sorry,
only
VA
reason
secretary, sorry.
that I like
Now we're all
VA
mixing
for
them up.
Buttigieg is because it's a career killer, and I would like to see his career killed.
That's
But
true.
are you kidding? How does this freaking guy end up in all these lists? But we've got all these incredible people who are nowhere to be seen, not even being considered, but somehow he's the only one.
No, it's mine. But
He was
and
in the army for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
they're also discussing him for ambassador to the UN. It's don't put that smug face in any sort of public-facing
People
role.
hate us enough already. Do they understand? Does he understand that the world is mostly brown and he can't sit next to a brown person without his brain exploding? So the UN is not the job for him.
No.
Really, nothing in the world
No.
is the job of
He
Go
only-
be
he can
dog
only-
catcher of South Bend.
Right. He can only sound like he's lecturing people also.
Yes,
So that's
right.
not,
Right.
definitely don't put him at the UN.
And he's only lectures people in word clouds.
Right.
Totally.
He only knows McKinsey speak. Like, he is horrible for this. He's and like the VA. Do you know how badly we've treated veterans since the beginning of time? How badly we've treated them for the last 4 years?
I can just imagine him delivering speech after nonsense-filled speech about how, with soaring rhetoric about the importance of veterans, and never once achieving one single thing for veterans in the process of it.
Desperately need it. I mean, my freaking organization has to get IDs for veterans
Right.
every day because we don't even provide them with that. They can't get a job. They can't get like, it is so unbelievable. And I am an Army brat. I grew up on Army bases. Everyone in my family's been in the military. The VA treats people like shit.
Yeah.
The people, we give lip service to being the most important people in this country.
Yeah.
And you're going to put this guy who was mayor of my bathroom in charge of it? No. I'm sorry. It's unacceptable. And there are so many great people who have served, who have been in service, who are extraordinary, who understand. Because the other thing, he's never run a large agency.
Well, that's...
The entire South Bend City Hall probably has 12 employees.
Yeah.
He cannot do
Well, if
this
the whole
job.
city can fit in Michigan's football stadium, then I don't think we're talking about...
Can fit at the VA. Like, he cannot do this job, and it's so infuriating because both sides talk so much crap about how much we care about veterans, and we don't. And if you put someone like Buttigieg in office, it is proof that you give zero fucks about vets.
Which is proof that Democrats are often willing to offer, so...
Hopefully. I mean, both sides are, but come on. I mean, we have...
Well,
the things they've been going through, it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also just first of all, the implication that, I mean, this is how they get you out of the race, right? Is they say they're going to appoint you to something. They offered him something. So this is why this is a discussion at all, is because they offered him something. And I actually think that he was serving us better expanding our electorate. As much as I find everything about his politics annoying, he was serving us better as a candidate than he was as a not candidate. He serves us better as someone on the sort of campaign side of America than he does as somebody in the government.
Okay, look, no, he serves us better by going away.
Well, he would serve us really well if he would just go home.
You know what job we should give him, which is a fake job, but let's just make one up for him. Let's make him the ambassador to Fox News.
Oh,
yes.
There you go.
Done.
He's crushing it on there right now.
Yes. Yeah. Put that guy on Fox News and just let...
There you go.
Done.
You know what? Honestly, he could do something like press secretary, because the press secretary never says anything anyways.
Oh, right. And they just have to say a bunch of stuff that is nothing.
They'd have to make
that's
the
his specialty.
Smaller, but, like, he could do that. Like, you know...
Your disdain for him is giving me life.
I can't stand him or anybody who likes him.
But he is somebody that you put in a position where saying nothing is the job.
Yeah.
You don't put him in a position where you have to actually serve real people with services.
Big Kayleeson can be press secretary.
This is reminding me of our Alistair McAllister conversation.
Oh, that's right.
Greatest
what is it? Oh, it was Alistair McTaggart, and I kept calling him
Alistair McAllister, which now is the only thing I can call him after I heard that. All right. Well, this is unacceptable. However, the next one, EPA, it's an easy answer, and it's shocking to me that this is even a discussion. It should obviously be Inslee.
It should be who?
Yeah, Inslee.
That's
the obvious.
The only person who should have that job. I don't know who Mary Nichols is. I'm sure she's great. It should be Inslee. Come on.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's somebody you say, get out of the race and I'll appoint you to be the head of the EPA. That's how you do that.
It's the only reason he was in the race.
He was just there to talk about climate, and then you could say, get out of the race and we'll talk about climate. You don't offer nonsense people jobs that have real jobs, but Jay Inslee is exactly who you want at the EPA. That's so true.
He's the only person.
I love it.
Well, we solved it, so I think we did it.
All right, so who do we write angry letters to?
God, so there's so many people. I think, well, the first thing that we do as a true action item is we get on the phone with our representatives and tell them that we don't want the same leadership in the House and Senate that we've had. Just to register our discontent with everyone.
Yes. Well, look, my rep is Maxine Waters, and I will happily call her.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you got to call it. When I'm in Washington, I just stop by her office to say hi sometimes. And my mom and I started doing that when I was a kid, and I just found it a fun thing to do. So if I'm on the Hill, I just go by and I'm just like, hey, just saying hi. And then they're always like, hi. And I'm like, okay, bye. And then we leave.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
That's such a lovely thing to do.
That's what you got to do. Well, you got to, keep in touch with everyone.
Yeah.
But I mean,
So we're calling MOCs and telling them we want new leadership.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I don't know, we have no one to call in the Senate, but if you are a non-California listener, call your senators and tell them you also want different leadership.
Oh,
Everyone.
Can I
Yes.
tell you my darkest time of this entire week
Great.
was.
Yes. We're 2.5 hours in. Let's go. Let's go for it.
All right, we can be done after this. It just made me think of it when we were talking about our senators here. I received my return form email from Dianne Feinstein this week, probably on Wednesday afternoon when everyone was at their highest level of panic. Her response to me from when I basically told her to die of COVID after she did nothing in the
Look, she didn't do nothing, Brent.
hearing.
She hugged Lindsey Graham.
I wrote her a deranged Karen style email that really, the fact that she responded to this email, actually maybe I should congratulate her for the time of day, because it was unhinged. It was the musings of a crazy person. But I saw my phone that I had an email from Dianne Feinstein, and it was all I could do to not chuck that across the room and flip the coffee table and anything. So let's get rid of her. I don't know.
Well, we got it.
Look, she's trying to get rid of herself with all this hugging infected
I know.
Republicans.
I call her office about once a week just to tell her to resign. Just FYI, if you're looking for activities.
All right. Is there anything that we and or listeners or people can do to influence who they choose on the cabinet?
I think a lot of it is down to media and and the kinds of traditional activist pressure that we're used to exerting. I think this is actually where calling your reps, even though it's not a direct thing that they can do, creates a sort of general ethos on the Hill that allows them to think, okay, well, maybe we need to step in and say something. So I think that it's always worth telling your representatives that
it's really your senators if we're going to complain about the cap.
Right, it's really your senators if it's so that's in Californians. I don't know who we're supposed to call. But yeah. So you should definitely call your senators about this. And then I think a lot of it, these kinds of early conversations are driven by discussion. They're driven by media. These are moments where it really does matter if there is a major social media drive, for example, to get rid of someone, if there is, and also if some of those really public, congressional voices that everyone hates to listen to have these things on their radar, that's meaningful, but they have to hear that from their constituents. They don't just spontaneously think of these things. I think that's what's been so frustrating about having all these representatives tweet at us to do something about all of this stuff, is it's well, we are not in the room. CNN does not call me to find out what they should think about, the labor secretary, but they do call AOC to ask her what she thinks. So it is actually more important that you think the right thing than that I somehow find a miraculous thing to do that, is. So those people have to be pushed to do the right thing. But I think part of the frustrating thing about the appointments process is that it's not that transparent. The cabinet is not transparent. It's not a process where the American people get an easy chance to weigh in. So it either has to be ethos pressure, or it has to, your senator has to be listen, my constituents will string me up if you pick this person.
Yeah.
Of course, none of them actually think they're going to lose their jobs ever, and all of them are awful. So it's hard to know what to do.
Right. Oh man.
But that said, write an op-ed.
Okie doke.
Sure. And we'll tell you some of those groups to donate to.
Oh yeah, well we'll definitely send you the donate link to spread the vote, because Kat's been on here 2.5 hours. She at least deserves some donations to spread the vote.
Yeah.
And then if there's any other organizations then that Kat recommended earlier back 2.5 hours ago when we were talking about this, then we'll also
definitely
put the link to those. And also be involved in that race, you guys. This determines the entire trajectory of the Senate. I feel for local House races, I feel sometimes uncomfortable about getting too involved in races that aren't in or near my district, because I feel well, that's their representation. They shouldn't have to listen to me, a New Yorker who lives in LA. In the Senate, I don't feel any such responsibility, because I feel that is actually, I don't have any Senate representation, so I might as well go impose mine on theirs.
And I feel very strongly about out-of-state involvement in races 99% of the time. This is that 1% of the time.
Yeah, this is different.
This is that time when it matters. And when we know that 1 billion% of Republican dollars are going into this race from around the country. So like this is for, all the marbles. This is the balance of the Senate. If ever there was a time to get involved out of state, it's now.
Totally. And on some level, you were just asking sort of like what people should do to make sure that their right, person becomes a cabinet secretary. Listen, these two things are tied together in the sense that it's going to be much easier to pass Elizabeth Warren for Treasury Secretary if there are 50 Democratic senators than if there are only 48 Democratic senators. So
Exactly.
I mean, there's a million different instances, obviously, why having the Senate is important. Like, duh, we don't need to explain all those things to you, but
But thanks for clarifying.
Right. But you know what I mean? Everything hangs on this. So
Yeah, get involved.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, friends. That's
This has
it
been
for
a
us.
blast.
Thank you so much
did
for
it.
coming on.
I know,
I feel
it was
like
fun.
we've been talking about it for such a long time, and then it turned out that we had also been talking about it and not talked to you about it. So,
This was great. Thanks for having me.
of course, anytime.
Yeah, for sure.
And we will talk to you guys next week.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.